the numbers all go to 11.
Good evening, gentle listener. Welcome to The Void. We have a very special guest this evening. Producer, engineer, recording studio magic maker, Mike Exeter. Welcome. Welcome to the show.
Thank you very much. What an intro. Wow.
Yeah. Well, it's interesting as well because you have had this very long relationship with Tony Iommi, and this show is in fact named after Into the Void.
Of course,
one of the most majestic riffs of all time.
Yeah, it's brilliant, isn't it? Yeah, and thank God it's not another tribute band.
It's true.
I've been lucky enough to work with Tony since about 1996. So yeah, 22 years I've known him now.
How did you guys meet?
I was making a Cradle of Filth record with another fantastic producer engineer called Kit Walven,
awesome,
who had been Tony Visconti's main guy. So he'd done like lots of David Bowie and Thin Lizzy stuff, and we were finishing off a Cradle of Filth album, and he heard that Tony and Glenn Hughes were working on some demos.
Yeah.
So he brought Tony into Depp Studios, which was owned by UB40, to do some mixes. And we had a bit of a laugh doing it. And then Kit couldn't continue the process. So Tony's manager, Ralph, said, do you fancy sort of doing some more demos? They're not sure what they're doing. Tony's just writing. And it was Tony, Glenn, Dave Holland, the drummer, and Don Airy. And it was like rock royalty. It was hilarious, and we just got on because Tony's hilarious, and it was just fun. And from that, it was just any time Tony felt like doing something, he would, or Ralph would be in touch. There was a short period when Sabbath reunited in '99.
Yeah,
I think that was off the back of or around the time that Tony was looking to take his solo career a little bit further.
Yep.
So he went to the States to work with Bob Marlette, who Rob Halford had suggested was a great producer to work with. So I lost touch with Tony for 2 or 3 years, I think, and then the thing happened with Dave Holland, as we should say.
Yes.
And what had become 8 Star a bootleg was the whole Glenn Hughes Tony thing. And Tony said, well, we're going to quash 2 things. We're going to kill the bootleg, and we can't really be associated with the Dave Holland thing. So why don't we see what we can do with the tapes? And we got another drummer, Jimmy Copley, and recut it, and that was the Depp sessions, and that kind of really re-solidified the working relationship. And I've been lucky enough to do everything that he's done ever since.
Oh, wow!
Yeah,
that's pretty huge. Hey, I think everyone.
Oh, because I stole some master tapes.
Every listener out here is just dying inside. By the way, they are desperately wish to.
Well, it's all about luck, but it's also all about when you're given those opportunities to step up to the plate and just go, what the hell, what can go wrong?
Yeah. Well,
plenty, by the way.
Well, yeah, but that's it's about the ears. Like, you've earned those ears.
Yeah.
And okay, so this is a thing that I think is true professionally, personally. I think it's true in every way. It's a Maya Angelou quote that said, "I've learned that people will forget what you said, people will forget what you did, but people will never forget the way you made them feel." And I think that's true in pretty much every area of life, but nowhere more true than in such a special place than the recording studio. Is that a part of the way you approach things, is creating that emotion, and especially like with someone where you've had this long relationship with, how do you sort of see that sort of things, like creating that space?
It's interesting, actually. I've just been going over horrible word, rebranding. Doing a new website is what I've actually been doing, but I needed a big quote, and it just came to me that really the only thing that matters is the artist and their vision. So sad to say to anybody that thinks it's all about technology, it really isn't. It's about getting into the essence of who that creative person is and what they're trying to achieve, and realizing that you can't force creativity. Nobody knows where it comes from, so it has to have an outlet, and you need to be that person that can draw the best out of an artist, and you can do it in many ways. It's all psychology. It's about making them feel comfortable enough to do that thing, and not get in the way, and just make them feel that everything's going to be fine.
Yeah.
And it's really as simple as that. And it takes a lifetime to get to that point where you realize that you aren't the most important person in the room. And I can't believe I'm saying that. But it's very true. You know, it's one of these annoying things that you look back and you go, oh, I really wish I'd felt this way 20 years ago.
Yeah.
But that's the point. You know, I go back and I look at, you know, meeting with Tony the first time and then rekindling that a few years later, going, I'd have never been up for this relationship back then.
Yeah.
And I look back now to where I am, like, say, last year when I was able to mix the final Black Sabbath show for the movie.
No big deal. The final,
you know,
oh my God.
Well, exactly, because that's not an important job, is it? And I was calmer
really
doing that than I was doing, you know, probably meeting Ronnie for the first time. It's really weird. The more you go forward, you just have to sort of keep re-equipping yourself mentally and physically to do this stuff. And it's hard, you know, it's a continuing thing. It's not, there's no answers. It's just, I guess, just gets back to that whole thing of, how you make people feel is so important, because if someone's feeling guarded, they're not going to perform. You know, and I always say that horribly vulgar thing that you Australians are far too polite to understand. But when you go into the recording studio, everybody's no, exactly. Everybody's getting their cocks out on the table to be judged.
Yeah,
it's really that simple, and it is vulgar, but that's what it's
I'm shocked.
So. I know you are.
Yeah,
it's made your hair go pink. So if people don't feel they can unzip metaphorically, it's just not going to. I know, sorry, it's degraded.
No, but
already.
it's great though, because it totally explains it really well.
Is that a TARDIS taking off?
The level of I've worked in the music industry since I was 20. I haven't seen that, but
you haven't worked with Ozzy. Oh no, he's never done that.
No, he's never.
Not in front of me.
I mean, and with those kind of people as well, I would imagine a lot of people would behave a bit strangely around them, because there is that thing. I mean, I spoke to Kerry King from Slayer, and he said, I was talking to him about how everyone on the tour was afraid of him and sort of in awe, like he was walking around and everyone was afraid, and he's like, I know what that's like. I was like that with Rob Halford. I was like that with Tony Iommi. I couldn't even say hello. And it's like,
funny.
And it must be a strange experience being those people.
Well, I had to talk Jason Newsted down from the cliff when he was asked to do. I mean, I say that terribly, but when he was asked to do the Who Cares project, I had to have a call with him. Now, this is Jason Newsted. When I was at college learning how to do some of this stuff, one of my classes was a year and a half in the life of Metallica. Sit down, watch that movie. This is how a record gets made. You know, and then Making a Pump by Aerosmith. I had really cool teachers. A big shout out to Bruce Marshall, who was awesome. And so I watched this, and I'm talking to the Jason Newsted, and he's nervous. He's going, I've got to play bass for Tony. And I went, well, it's only Tony. You know, he's really cool. He goes, how can you say it's only Tony? He's a fucking legend. And I'm like, I get this now, you know, and it's just a circumstance, and I guess it's because I'm so comfortable around Tony that it does become the norm, but in a really good way, because you're there, because I just guess it just solidifies that whole thing about the relationship's the most important thing, and that trust just allows it to happen.
Yeah.
And long-standing relationships in the industry they're really good. You know, I mean, I've been lucky not to have to do too many sessions since I went freelance, which is a good 20 years ago.
Yeah.
I haven't had to do too many sessions where it's just turn up and meet the people for the first time and hit record.
Yeah.
It's mainly about, you know, sitting on the phone with people for 2 or 3 months before, if you're in a different country, you know, or if you can drive the length of the country to go and meet the people. And because you're going to have to spend time with these guys and you got to look them in the eye, you know. Yeah.
Yeah.
So, I mean, I did a project with a band, God, it would have been shortly after we did the Who Cares thing. I went over to New Zealand twice to work with these guys. I'd been on the phone with their manager and I'd been exchanging stuff for literally 6 months before I hopped on a plane.
Yeah.
You know, it's so
That's nice.
So building relationships is so important. Yeah.
Yeah. Because then you're almost just stepping back into their head. Like once you've spent some time in someone's head, it's almost like, and I feel like as well, like what you're talking about, when people are comfortable, when they are almost not themselves and they're connected to the thing that flows through them or whatever.
Yeah.
But you let their ego fall away almost, because ego often comes out when you feel threatened, your ego will arc up. When you're uncomfortable or frightened, or, you know, that's when the ego, and, you know, you can't do anything from that place. I mean,
no, absolutely. Everybody's fragile. I mean, there's these two states. There's the guy who really is fragile and just and you've got to put him in that place to perform. But the other side of that person is he's a born performer and they really want to. So it's trying to get them into that place where you just sort of like the blue touch paper and retire, because they're going to do something that is incredible and you've got to be in that position to capture it. And so you've got to set that up and make them feel comfortable. I mean, what an interesting thing, and again, it was like years into learning this stuff. You know, I mean, nice having a mentorship from a guy like Tony, because I learned so much from him, and Ralph, his manager's been brilliant.
Lovely gentlemen.
They've just inadvertently taken me under their wing and watched me from afar and kept me from doing too many bad things. Awesome. But getting back to the Tony thing, it was like he sat there one day and you know, I'm in this enviable position of we're having to do a solo on a track for someone else. And we're going through them, and I just, you know, stupidly ask at some point, what do you think of that one? He goes, oh, I don't know, I just played it. And I thought he was being his usual humorous self, but he hadn't heard what he played because he played it. And you think, actually, it was all coming from somewhere inside. There was no pre-planned thing that was going on. Therefore, you had to play it back to him for him to make a decision.
Holy shit.
Yeah, and that's what happens. He was in a free enough place that's how he creates. And his process of coming up with riffs, he doesn't sit down to come up with something. Generally, he'll just have a guitar, and it's maybe late at night while he's just sitting waiting to go to bed, he'll pick up an acoustic and put his phone in to record and play. And out of that will come maybe 5 minutes of stuff to listen to. And he won't bother listening to it. And then
that is wild.
It's great, and those are the genesis of ideas that he can then go, I've got some ideas, should we have a listen to them and let's maybe build some of them. So it's literally come from nowhere.
Wow.
And that's because he's in that place. He goes, I fancy just playing a little bit. And it's a massive lesson that I've learned. It's you've got to give yourself time to absorb stuff. You've got to free yourself up enough to listen objectively, and that's hard. So this is why it all becomes this strange world I'm in, where I've been given an opportunity to work on some of the larger projects in rock that still exist, you know, and they give themselves time because they've learned to. So I always then go into projects with younger bands, and it's like, why are you worrying about the clock? You know, it'll all be okay, but stop telling me we've got to, you know, get all these vocals done by this time, and we can't afford to go back and listen from the beginning of the song because we've got to finish this chorus. And I'm like, how do you know what this chorus needs until you listen from the beginning of the song? You know, well,
the folly of youth, my friend. The folly of youth.
Well, exactly. You know, I sat in a room with Tony and Ronnie where we've listened back, everybody's eyes are shut because we're listening from the beginning of the song, and that's, you know, that's what you do. And then you realise actually jet lag's kicked in and one of them's asleep.
I can't believe you spent I mean, you to talk about like rock and roll and heavy metal as a language, like you haven't just hung out with fluent speakers. You've hung out with the people who wrote the alphabet.
Oh, totally.
They were, and you know, listeners, I actually met Mike on the Out of My Mind sessions, which was 8 years ago. It was John Lord and Ian Gillan from Deep Purple, Tony Iommi from Black Sabbath, Iron Maiden's Nico McBrain on drums, and you were chill as hell. This was just going on around you, and you seemed relaxed as hell.
I put on a great front.
It was good. It was well done.
Yeah, well, that was only, let me put this in context. That was only 4 years before I had a total nervous breakdown and nearly died. So
really?
Let's put that into context. Oh, yeah. Yeah. And I can laugh about it now because it's coming up to 4 years ago. Yeah. But yeah, that was a great front. But then I guess, again, I kind of knew everything was going to be okay because nobody's there to screw up. Nobody's willing anybody to fail. I mean, you can see it in this lovely documentary you put together. Everybody's giggling away at stuff, and everybody's there to have fun. We're all pros. We're going to get the job done. Yeah. And, you know, I mean, I have to say the assistant who was on the session, I think it was a guy called Simon Blore. We literally had that for a day. Trevor Horn had kindly given us the studio for the day. And he, you know, the assistant there knew exactly what he was doing. So I had to walk in and kind of take control of making everybody feel good, which wasn't hard because the moment I met Nico, we were laughing about shit.
He's lovely.
Well, we start talking about golf because I'm again, you find out about people. So I knew he was into golf. And I knew he'd fallen out with Kevin Shirley over drum editing. So I thought, well, there's a couple of buttons I can push there. So, you know, you do your research. Thank God for Google.
It's great. Hey,
but except
it's my tool.
Yeah, but you can really shit yourself up as well because then I started when I got to do 13, I started googling stuff about Rick Rubin and I couldn't find anything to get hold of. So
well, this is something I wanted to ask.
Shit your pants moment.
Yeah, I wanted to ask this. So you worked on the very last Black Sabbath album, obviously, a fairly seismic moment in the history of musical history. Yeah, that was very articulate. So you were an engineer on it. Greg Fiedleman was an engineer, and Rick Rubin was the producer. How does this? I mean, no one knows about this stuff. How does the dynamic work between you? Like how? And that obviously there'd be huge curiosity about the making of this record. Like what? How does it work?
Yeah, that was quite interesting actually. See the way the whole project worked was, if I take it back slightly to how to sort of continue on how Tony gets from that. We
can always talk about Tony, like
that acoustic guitar thing. Yeah, I mean, so that gets very quickly. We got into a routine where we would start putting ideas down because he doesn't want to play people's stuff off his phone. So he wants to have a catalogue of songs. So we would start putting ideas down and come up with a drum pattern that would maybe suit a specific riff that we thought might be worth looking at. And then I'd throw some bass on, I'd program those drums, and maybe we'd put some keyboards or orchestration. It's like the main riff for a song might come out of one of those moments. Yeah. And over a period of like maybe 2 days in a week, we'd develop those and we'd maybe go, it's just a riff, let's put it down and call that a day. Or it might turn into a song. Wow. Always with the idea that a singer's going to come along and do their best with it. So what might feel like a verse riff to somebody could be a middle eight or a chorus or anything to someone else. So this would go on, and the real first thing that was born out of that was the Heaven and Hell album with Ronnie. And that then developed into writing sessions and things like that. So when we got to the Sabbath album 13, we'd already got we knew Ozzy was going to come and have a listen to some ideas, as we put it, and he came up just after Christmas 2010. And Tony said, well, he's bound to only want to listen to a couple of ideas. Well, we sat and played him an hour and a half's worth of stuff.
Wow.
And that was only half of what we'd got prepared. That was relevant to what Ozzy would sing, because we'd got stuff that wouldn't be right for Ozzy because Tony kind of knew what Ozzy liked. As we thought.
So he writes for his singer a bit, like not obviously.
Well, he writes for himself, but he knows that it's not precious, and he'll change a riff if a singer needs him to. It was quite interesting. The dynamic between him and Ronnie was probably the masterclass of my life, because
oh my God,
knowing their history of it was quite interesting watching them really concentrating on doing as much as possible to make the other one feel at ease, because they'd had a pretty acrimonious fallout over the years, and they'd come back together, and it was so lovely. The feeling was always good. So they were constantly pushing each other, and it was always like, oh, do you mind if I change this chord? Will that affect you? No, I can sing that. Or I've come up with this idea. Do you think that affects what you've played? And there was no sycophancy. It was just like, what's best for the thing? And Geese would always be there in the middle going, I really like that. That's good. Or how about we try that? So there was this lovely quiet environment. And the same thing was happening with 13. We started, once Ozzy he took a couple of ideas away. He was floored. Once it was decided it was all going ahead, which was sort of the beginning of 2011.
Oh, wow. It was in the works for that long.
Oh God!
Was it for years and years and years?
It was 2 years between the first meetings with Rick that the band had back in the beginning of 2011. It was 2 years before it was complete. Now it only took that long because Tony was diagnosed with cancer halfway through. So it's we would have been recording a year earlier if his diagnosis hadn't come through. But again, that gave the whole project time to develop. They got to really know each other again as a working relationship, because they hadn't written together properly for years. They had a little stint after the reunion in 1999-2000, but that didn't really go anywhere. So there was always this thing of like, they had a go. Rick Rubin didn't like the songs. Everybody says the story, Rick Rubin thought they were shit, and it died.
True?
Well, there wasn't enough there in the 3 or 4 ideas that they had.
Got it.
To make good songs. I mean, I've been privy to listen to everything.
Oh my God!
And it's okay to say to Tony, that's not actually that. That's a bit ordinary. And that's paraphrasing his words. So it's okay to look at him and go, because he trusts me. Because
I've got to say, how do you feed back? Like,
well, I laugh.
Yeah. Is that how you deal with it?
And he normally goes,
I don't know about
thanks.
This take. Yeah.
Well, because the funny thing is, I'll tell you a quick funny story. This goes back to the comfort factor.
I'm pretty much please tell me. This is
during 13, right? He's we get into the studio now. I would always drive him to and from the studio because he and I would have separate apartments. He'd be there with his wife. I'd be in mine. And I'd pick him up and we'd go up from Santa Monica up to either Ozzy's house when writing or recording up in Malibu. So we'd always have a good old giggle on the way to and from.
Yeah.
So we get out of the car, we get into the studio, and we're continuing our stupidity. And we're into this first recording of the day. And Rick's thing was very much on this occasion, just get the guys in there, get them playing.
Yeah.
So, and Tony was like, I don't want to do solos without thinking about them. I've got an idea of where I want to go, but I don't jam solos anymore.
Yeah.
And so Rick's like, just give it a go. So we're just in that flow, and Tony goes for a solo. I wish I could remember what song it was, but he went for a solo, and it was the weediest sound I've ever heard. And there was all this fumbling going on, and I started laughing, and Rick's looking over at me, and Greg's looking at me, and I'm just going, just ignore me. It's really funny. So I then open the door at the end, and I look over at Tony, and I go, nice solo, mate. And he goes, pissing hell. He goes, I couldn't fucking see the pedal board. He's got tinted prescription sunglasses.
Of course he does.
He's got to the studio.
He's a rock
and
star.
He hasn't taken them off to exchange them for his normal ones because he's left them back at the apartment. So he's standing there in the vibey pitch black, and he can't see where his foot's going. So I laugh about this solo effort, and one of the assistants came up and he goes, oh, Tony, I can fix that. And he brings some luminous tape to put around the foot switch on the pedal board. And I went, oh, that's semi-genius. I said, but how's he going to see where his foot is because he's wearing black shoes? So I'd go, give me some of that tape. So I created this big fucking arrow and taped an arrow to his shoe so he could see where his shoe was pointing, and I was hiding it from
him. I love
him.
this.
He goes, what are you up to? And I put this arrow on his foot, and he goes, oh, you pillock. He goes, that's brilliant. So all you can see is this luminous arrow going towards this luminous square. And Geezer starts laughing in Ozzy. Anyway, but it really put everything at ease because he just started giggling away, and he was able to perform. But I know him well enough to do that.
Yeah.
The funny thing was, he goes, on the way home, he goes, oh, God, he goes, you should have seen Rick's face. He says, I'm looking Rick in the eye at the end of the day. We're discussing the song. He goes, all I can see is him looking down, he goes. And I'm thinking, what's he looking at? And Rick hasn't been party to any of this, and he can just see this luminous arrow on Tony's foot. And Rick's sense of humour, if he has one, isn't very obvious. So we were just laughing because it was school kid humour.
Yeah.
But that's Tony. Well, it's all of them really. So, that's
they've got a boyish.
fun.
They've got a really I've only spent one day. You've spent many sessions with them, but they have such a youthful energy around them. Like seeing these people in the
lunatics.
studio, they're like 25 and it's 1970 something, and they're on the top.
Yeah.
They're still on the top of the world. But
totally.
being around them, you're like, you can still see the stars in their eyes, and they're still so in love with the process. And you kind of go,
completely.
if anyone deserved to have this for 30 years, it's you guys. You know, your hearts are in the right place, and you can tell. And
well, there's this beautiful piece. I mean, I'm the last gig that they did at the beginning of last year that turned into the big movie. There's a song called Dirty Women, and I think it's their finest moment on film.
Really?
Because Tony goes into this, I don't know how many minutes of a guitar solo.
Yeah,
and
just casually.
And the director Dick, he's brilliant. He's filmed it so dirty. It's like quick camera moves and all that shit.
Nice.
And it splits into 3 screens at the high point of this whole 5-minute section.
Yeah.
And there's Tony's close-ups, and there's Ozzy on stage looking over at Tony, and it just gets the grin of a 6-year-old because he's looking at Tony, and he actually starts clapping Tony while he's playing.
That's adorable.
And he doesn't know what to do, but the love that's going on that stage and the 3 kids playing is just unbelievable, and it is just such a fantastic moment. Apart from the fact it's an amazing performance, you just get to see the close-ups. I mean, Dick was telling me, he said he had his best camera guy with a 1200mm lens getting the close-ups on Tony's and Geezer's hands. Awesome. He said, you know the shots I want, get these shots. And it was just stunning, and I think it's a brilliant people have said it's the best Sabbath live memory ever, because
That's
it's
huge.
just the moment of that night.
Yeah.
And that goes back a little bit actually to when you said about, people remember how you made them feel. That people have said, how, what do you get, how do you translate to students, because I do college talks sometimes, how do you translate to students about, the difference between being able to buy all these plugins and actually knowing the artist? And I said, it's just something that you start to get. I was at that final show. I knew Sabbath. I knew what they needed to sound like.
Yeah.
To feel like you were in that arena on their final gig. And it didn't hurt that they played a blinder that night.
Yeah.
But it still had to sound like that classic rock band in that arena. It doesn't sound like a studio fucked around with performance with lots of
overdubbed
extra
or replaced
stuff.
shit.
Yeah.
Not that you'd ever have to do that with Black Sabbath, but
no, I mean it's literally that performance, and we were lucky. It was a great performance, and it's one night. It wasn't cut together from the two final nights. It's literally start to finish. That's performance.
Awesome. That's the best.
It's amazing.
That's the like. There's nothing more wonderful than capturing those moments, and when from as a shooter or whatever, there's nothing more magic than getting being in that moment, and you're in people's heads and you're in their heads. And I guess the thing that I think is really interesting about this space, and when you do get to bring their vision to life, you really the kind of space between you's kind of disappeared a bit. You really and there's this wonderful story in Henry Rollins' latest stand-up special, which is amazing. But he talks about being on a festival with Ozzy, and I don't know whether they played earlier or whatever, but he comes up to him and he's behind, his side of stage, and he's kind of got his head down, and he's like, Ozzy, you're amazing, or something along those lines. And he's like, is there anyone else? Is there anyone even out there? He's like, yeah, the entire festival is out there. There's 40,000 people out there. He's like, I'm always worried no one's going to show up. And he's like,
it's funny.
And I was just like, you just got to love it. Just got to love him. You're like, the complete utter humility. It's like why they've been around forever. It's like why they're everything. Because,
it's totally it. I mean, it's even Halford. He's hilarious, and he's the most down to earth person. They're all down to earth. They're great people. There's no stardom with them. They just do what they do. And I mean, Ozzy probably has to be the most protected because he's the most visible. Yeah.
What do you mean by
he's
protected?
Lovely.
From the people?
Just from the people. Yeah, because he's pretty identifiable.
Yeah. Can't really walk down the street, kind of.
No, exactly. So, but he has
Sharon,
one of the
who's amazing.
Well, exactly. So
I'm in
but he's in his world, where a lot of writing for 13 was done. We did a lot at home with Tony and I would do stuff at home and then take it back across to LA. But most of the writing stuff was done over an 18-month period out at Ozzy's house in LA. And that's because he had a studio where you could just turn up and you weren't sharing with other bands, and therefore it was his home, and everybody felt like it was our home. Yeah. And I spent some time out there on my own with him. Just did a couple of weeks of sort of vocal writing and things, and we just I'd pop in, I'd hear the shouting coming down the stairs, and hope he hasn't tripped. And he'd walk past and come back with a cuppa for me,
What a doll.
It's just home, and then the dogs would arrive and he'd sit on his lap doing vocals with a Pomeranian dog on his lap, and it was great. And that, again, how relaxed everything is, and he's just there to do a couple of hours work because that's all it needs. And suddenly he'd sort of break away and he'd fix you with a stare, and you'd go, "Oh God, what have I done now?" And he'd go, "Have I ever told you about the day that Randy died?" And I'm like,
"What?"
No. And just it suddenly occurred.
You're not going to tell
this
story, are you?
I'm not going to tell the story, but no,
no. My heart
Yeah,
just
Ozzy
exploded.
shot him by
Yeah,
mistake.
yeah. Let's not do that. We'll just
But
all imagine. We'll all just
hearing
imagine.
it from, because it's quite harrowing
Oh my god.
what they went through, but it was the fact that he just felt, I'm going to tell you about what happened that day, and you're like, wow, that's real inner sanctum stuff, and just that just goes to show the level of comfort and trust that you've engendered in these people. So it does take some doing, but I always say, I recently visited my old school out in Florida, back in September, and I was just saying to them, you just got to put yourself in that position that you are the person that people can trust.
Yeah.
And you're going to do the right thing by them. And if you're just cool with them, people expect some of the guys that I've come across in terms of students and young engineers are always trying to be the most impressively efficient and quick at everything, and I'm just like, God, slow down. You're driving me mad. Yeah. And Jesus, just tell me when it's ready. I've got stuff I can do. The classic things are singers. They think they've got to impress them with everything, and if you say to a singer, especially like Ronnie or Rob,
Jesus Christ,
it's going to take me 10 minutes. Just you could be in there, but you're not going to hear anything. We say, oh yeah, okay, just give me a call when you're ready, no problem. And then you start working towards getting them comfortable, and it's like, we've got a headphone problem at the moment. Let me just sort this out. Take your time, because when they start, they want to perform. They don't want you to suddenly come up to them afterwards and go, God, I really wish I'd said something, but we've got distortion all over your vocal.
Yeah.
You just take care of that shit, and you keep them in the loop. It's all communication. It's all about, there's no clever shit going on here. It's just, it's real common sense. Yeah.
It's so funny how these really obvious things people don't realize.
Yeah.
Because this is like a primal thing. Like, this is a way we've communicated, like making music and stuff. I mean, we've been communicating like this since we were people. I say this with no actual true anthropological proof here, but I figure from when we were making tools, we were probably banging on things. Like, that's just
we were probably actually, the men were probably banging the women on their heads and grunting. I know what you mean. So nothing has changed.
I've had, so it's, speaking of Rob Halford,
yes,
I've got a couple of questions. So Jason Fuller of the almighty band Blood Duster asks, does Halford have any notes on how he could hit the high notes, like how he does? And what unique, and Matthias says, what unique challenges does Halford's insane vocal register present to a producer or engineer?
It's no challenge at all, because as long as,
isn't it just awesome?
he goes near a microphone and he performs, and again, not being blasé about it, you record it. It's about knowing that you're not going to nail the preamp on the vocal, on the before the microphone or after the microphone. You're not going to nail that preamp. It's not going to distort. You're just going to capture it. It's funny doing vocals with him. You got to push him. So you just go, can you try this? Here, I've got an idea. Can you do that? Can you, while you're still doing this, can you do another pass? Yep. Okay, Mike, I'll give it a go. Comes the voice, Rob, can you do us a third harmony on that? Okay, give us the notes. And it's like, he's in the zone to be pushed. And when you say to him, can you not do your Painkiller voice or go falsetto? Can you try and do it full voice? And he'll go, bloody hell, Mike, I'm 68. And then, but what's really funny is when listening to stuff, he'll sit down and go, let's have a little listen to some Dio, because I feel this needs, what would Ronnie do is what he'll say. That
happened.
And
I've never felt more like Wayne's World in my life right now. I'm just saying, I've never felt more like Wayne.
But that's the thing.
We're not worthy.
They're all fans. They all love You only have to look at rock family trees to know how everybody knows each other. I mean, talking to Don Airy earlier, he's played in every band that ever lived, you know.
Yeah.
So it's all about these people. They grew up with each other. You know, I am so seriously honoured and lucky to have been able to work with the best singers in rock. And people can say bollocks, they're the best singers, but Dio, Glenn Hughes, Gillan, you know, it's like, fuck, Halford. Who else is there that does that?
Dude, we're not worthy.
So,
I'm just saying.
Exactly.
Like,
so, you know, it's like, so they aren't trying to outdo each other. They're just going, I really loved what he did.
I mean, cannot believe you just said that. Rob Halford says, what would Ronnie... So that's how you hit the high notes, guys? Like,
well, no. I mean, he would just go, what would Ronnie's approach have been here? How did he do that? What made that song what we loved, you know?
Because you worked on the latest Priest record.
I did, yeah.
It's killer.
Oh, thank you. Yeah, well, I have to say, that's... we all said it to Glenn. It's Glenn's fault. We all said this is the worst idea in the history of fucking ideas, Glenn. But coming from you, it's probably going to work. And that's when he said, "Oh, it's all right. What we thought we'd do is, you know, Andy Sneap's name's been mentioned a lot. He said we want you to be involved as well, and we thought it'd be good to have Tom Allen." And we're all going, "You're fucking insane!" And it's the best thing that could have happened because Andy and I have known each. Well, that's it's
crowded.
It's three very different people.
Yeah.
Andy and I have known each other years, and he and I have this great relationship of you wouldn't want to see our WhatsApp chat. And although Andy says
we would, that's lies.
These little videos and clips that he sends me find him, I think he actively goes out looking for them. Yeah. I was sat on a plane going to LA at the beginning of this year, and thank God I had my headphones in because the video clip that arrived had some graphic sound in it, and because he's a shitbag. Yeah. But what's great about Andy, Tom, and me is that we all really give a shit, and we know what we want to hear, and there's no ego there. It's about what can we do to make this as good as possible. And there's a thing that Andy and we had a conversation once where he actually said it, and it was literally about a 3 a.m. conversation where we were chatting about things that we'd done and things that we were doing, and we were working on a particular thing on the Priest album. Yeah. And he said, he goes, there's a reason that you and I are working with the best metal bands in the world. And that actually struck me as like, fucking hell, I've never thought about it like that, because his track record's huge. Mine's pretty huge, and suddenly it's like, there we are in a room together.
How did you guys meet? It wasn't on this?
No, I met him back in 1998, I think it was. He came in. He'd done an album by a band called Kill to This. Yep. And he came back to do a follow-up, and I was the assigned person to help him on it. Yeah, right. He just got Pro Tools, and I've been using it for quite a few years, and so we had a really good fun first meeting, and we've just kept in touch since. Yeah. And he's great fun. I'd met Tom back in '91 when he came to my school in Florida to do a lecture. I met him again 4 years ago, almost to the day today, where we were at some awards thing, and I had a chat with him, and then I met him again at the beginning of last year, and he's just so funny, and we just had a great laugh, just learning off each other. Yeah. You taught him Pro Tools. Well, Andy will never say that I taught him Pro Tools. He'll completely, he'll rescind that. But yeah, I had a hand in helping him through his teething issues. Yeah. But he's great, Andy. I'm
really... being cheeky, Andy Sneap.
No, but you're right to as well, because he can be a twat when he wants to be. No, he's really funny, and he gives credit where credit's due. I mean, he has his own way of doing things, and he's very successful. But when he asks a question, or you say, look, why don't you look at this? You may not like doing it this way, but have you thought about it? He'll go, fucking hell, you're a genius. And then
Well,
I
that's-
learned shit off him, and we're so giving with each other. And where Tom is, Tom sits sort of to one side or to the back of what's going on as a grand overseer, knowing fully what Judas Priest are, what they're about, and having that big history with them, knowing the personalities. And he's so musical because he is, again, he's one of those people. I learned so much of how to deal with Rob and how to push vocal recordings, and dealing with melodies and stuff. You know, when you got someone in a room like Ronnie kind of knows what he wants to do straight away. He would come in, right, with handwritten lyrics or typed out lyrics, and he would underline everywhere where he knew he wanted to do a double and everywhere he wanted to do harmonies as a starting point, and then everything else was up for discussion. Whereas Rob comes in fully prepared in another way, where he'll have a complete set of lyrics plus a load of alternate verses and rhymes and all this stuff.
Wow.
And he's not precious. He'll go, oh, well, if that line doesn't sound right, pick another line, you know, it'll all tell the story. That's the way it's written.
Wow.
You know, so, and he and Glenn work very hard on the lyrics, but nobody's too frightened to say, have you thought that really doesn't sound right? Or that word is horrible. I mean, I'll tell this one actually, because this relates to them all. This is the cocoon of working in a room, you know, away from the internet. Because Glenn's got a farm where he's got about, well, I don't think he's even got dial-up speed. It's so awful.
It's like living in Australia.
It's so dreadful. It's really funny. And Glenn doesn't give a shit because he's so anti-technology. So. I walked in one morning and there's Rob, there's Richie and Ian and Tom and Andy. And Scott was there as well, all just working around a solo because it was like, let's just throw a solo down. And I was set up in another room so Glenn and I could work on some stuff when he wasn't feeling great or he just wanted to work through a riff because his Parkinson's had really kicked in at this point. Yeah. So we're working in another room a lot of the time, just kind of getting him through the muscle memory thing and trying stuff and just helping you through it. And I walked upstairs one morning and I went, I said, what? Is that the solo then? And they're all like, yeah. I went, it's a bit Pirates of the Caribbean. and Richie said, fuck off. And I went, okay, fair enough.
Oh, that's great.
So they carried on. Oh my
God!
And there's this thing going round and round, and I was setting something up in the live room, and I'm like, well, I haven't really taken that to heart. So I walked back and I put my head through the door. He goes, any other nuggets? I went, I was being serious. He goes, what do you mean? I said, Tom, you're always on the internet. Why don't you call up Pirates of the Caribbean main theme? And eventually on Spotify, it trickles down and out comes Andy fucking nearly falls off his chair. He goes, fucking hell, Mike, you're spot on. He goes, oops. And everybody goes, oh shit, that was a good spot. Everybody was so in the middle of that concentrated piece of work that nobody had actually realised. It was just subconsciously one of the most famous theme songs except for Star Wars, you know. So, but I didn't care because it's like, well, I've got to say it because that's what you're expected to do. Yeah. And it's because there's a trust. I've known Richie since 2011. Yeah. You know, so you're gonna have those moments where you stick your neck out and you may get it chopped, but who knows?
But it's a good idea. Like, yeah, it's like, you know, that record that Metallica and Lou Reed made.
Oh God, yeah.
I listened to that and I'm like, no one in that room had the balls to tell either of them this wasn't good. No. It's like we all wanted that to be so good as a collective world, and it was just like everyone was too fucking scared. Like, this is why I have that complete respect for Bob Rock. Yeah. Because you see what that poor guy went through on the Black Album, and then the documentaries afterwards. Well, he's like, you know, he knew he wasn't going to get anywhere with them. There was no arrangement stuff that he could do. He literally said,
all I had was tempos. I could just say to them, or can we at least try this a bit quicker or slower? Because they were so anti being produced at that point.
Wow.
And then because he got their trust through that album, and they fell out big style by all accounts, and then they eventually went on to this major working relationship.
Yeah.
And, everybody, I can see it from Metallica fans' points of view of he completely destroyed their band.
Yeah.
But he didn't really. He made them evolve into something that set them up for the rest of their career. I mean, that's nearly 30 years ago. It's 27 years ago, isn't it, that album?
Oh, my God. That is wild. Yeah, and it's just, I don't know. I think about it sometimes because it's like, well, they came out as a thrash band, and thrash has a certain flavor to it.
Yeah.
And people get, I think it's sometimes hard, and look, I'm not an expert here, obviously, by any stretch of imagination, but I think...
Yeah, but you're a fan, and fans have a massively important opinion,
I feel like when people have these deeply emotional seismic experiences when they're teenagers or whenever they're having this experience, but when a band really, imprints on their DNA...
Yeah.
The way they sound then, if they don't sound like that anymore, you're like, what are you doing to my memories? It's almost like if you don't sound like Kill 'Em All Metallica anymore, well, who am I?
Yeah.
It's that deep. I don't know.
Well, this is the amazing thing. I mean, it's quite funny because if you take it back to 13, so you've got...
Please, let's just talk about this. Is great.
So let's imagine we made the album that followed The Devil You Know.
Yes.
With Ozzy singing.
Yep.
Because that could have happened. That could have been the follow-up to 13.
Yep.
Because the way Tony was writing was getting extremely majestic. And so here's the dichotomy is the wrong word, but this is what happens.
Yeah.
You've got Rick sitting them down going, no, that's not it at all.
What a bummer. I'm sorry.
Well,
is that a bummer?
Tony was like, oh, fuck.
I don't like that fucking attitude personally. Pardon my French.
But it was, if you've ever seen, here's something that everybody should watch. This was the thing. This was my research, is where I say, Google can be your enemy.
Yeah.
Because never try and diagnose a medical problem by Google, because I gave myself skin cancer once. It was like that ridiculous. Turned out it was a burst blood vessel.
Yeah.
So, never do that.
No.
But,
don't Google Rick Rubin.
Rick Rubin. Well, don't Google Corey Taylor talking about him.
I've heard of that. I love Corey Taylor. He's a delight.
Oh, he's brilliant.
Yeah.
I'll tell you about that in a minute, actually.
Awesome.
But so I Googled Rick, and I was like looking for videos on him, and now I'd seen him working on the Jay-Z 99 Problems thing, and I was like, he's kind of intense, but cool. And then he sits down with the Dixie Chicks. This is the video. Yeah. And the Dixie Chicks go to his house to play him some stuff.
Yep.
And he listens to the first one. He's quite talkative about it. And then the second one, he just goes, no. That really doesn't feel like it's got any heart or whatever. He goes,
how do you say that to people?
And the two other girls in the band, Natalie sat there, and she's like, kind of starts to agree with him. And the two other girls are like, well, kind of, what do you mean? And he's just like, well, it's okay. He goes, it just needs a new verse rewrite. And she looks at him, Natalie, and she goes, well, what do you mean? He goes, well, just rewrite the verse. And she goes, well, because she said, I don't really have any emotional connection to it. So he goes, well, rewrite it. And she goes, well, you rewrite it. And he just goes, well, then you'd still have no emotional connection to it. And he's so autistic.
What a prick.
But the beauty of him, you see, is he then says to the band, go back and imagine you're following your first album. And so this sets off this chain of events of like, how the fuck do we do that? How do you put yourself 45 years later, or 42 years later, from recording that first album, when you made that album because you've been touring it? I don't even know if they'd done their Germany stint at that point. It's all blurred. But that band who were hungry, that were just doing their thing, that had had lived through what they lived through, coming out of Birmingham, being hated by the press, to suddenly they're about to do the most anticipated reunion album for decades.
Yeah.
How do you put yourself back in that headspace? So that inadvertently creates this complete confusion. But because Rick's thing is, I don't care what it takes to get to the point of what this album needs to be, go do it. So we had stints where he's like, still not quite hearing what I feel I should. How about you guys book into a studio and jam for 3 weeks? So we did.
Wow. Oh, that.
So we spent 3 weeks. This is with Bill as well. It's Bill, Geezer, Tony, Ozzy, myself.
Oh, man.
A residential studio somewhere in England, and we just recorded everything. And even out of that maybe came a couple of ideas. I certainly know from memory that the main thing of Pariah came out of that session.
Wow.
And a blues jam, which I think turned into, oh God, I don't even know, Damaged Soul maybe. Because the trouble is I don't remember the names. I just remember the working titles.
Yeah.
Like,
what's the funniest working title?
Oh, well, this was classic. So we need I'll do my Rick impression. We need a song a bit like Planet Caravan. Okay. Right. Great. So, my song titling thing becomes stupid shit like a 6-figure digit followed by an underscore followed by another 2-digit number. So it'll be like today's date underscore idea number 1. So I've got all of these files. Yeah. So it's like, I remember HH, which was Heaven and Hell, because when we were writing for Heaven and Hell, HH underscore 0013 underscore 13. Would be the 13th idea of the 13th day of writing or something like that. And so you've got all these stupid things, and eventually everybody's getting confused. I'm like, well, it's not my fault. At least I know which fucking song you're talking about when you play it to me, because it's got a name on it. So we need some working titles. So Planet Caravan, I decided, well, planet will go moon, and type of caravan is a Winnebago. So that became Moon Winnebago, right? Which we all giggled about. And we were doing a playback just before we came back. Tony and I came back Christmas 2012 to do Christmas, and he had to have these top up treatments for his cancer. So we're doing this final listen through. I've got pad and paper. This is what we're going through. This is our homework to do. Yeah. And we get to Moon Winnebago. And it still makes Tony laugh to this day.
It's great.
And Greg's doing the playbacks, and he goes, okay, so now we have Moon Winnebago. And he goes to press play, and Rick goes, wait. He goes, do we have an alternate title? And Tony just fucking pissed. Well, he just did exactly what you did. Because it's a working title. I mean,
Can we have another title to Moon Winnebago? Because that's what we're actually going to run with.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, you had stuff like Pariah was originally called Angel because the studio was called Angelic. Yeah. So that was just called Angel. Pigs became, was that God Is Dead?
Yeah.
I don't know. Yeah, because it went da-da, which is like War Pigs. So the main chords are da-da, which is so Pigs, and there was there was another one, Richard Head, obviously Dickhead. Yeah, that was I can't remember what that became, but there were some great ones, and they stick. And then you get Damaged Soul and Zeitgeist, and we're all going, "What the fuck does Zeitgeist mean?" Yeah. Geese, what does that mean? I don't know. It's a good word. But certain stuff, Dear Father was always Dear Father. God Is Dead was always God Is Dead, and Loner. Loner was... I called that... Fountain Pen. Because Because originally we had when we were doing that, the original writing for that, Tony said, I fancy doing something a little bit like NIB, where the chorus is a drop down chorus. It's quieter than the main riff. So I said, well, what can we call that? We can't call it NIB, nib. I said, oh no, well, why don't we call it fountain pen? Because the fountain pen's got a nib. So that became fountain pen for a while. And I'm not lying, because on one of the documentary videos, you see a track sheet with all these names on them when we were rehearsing drummers. So it's like, what's this fountain pen and pigs and all this shit? So,
wait, rehearsing drummers for the thing? Okay, tell us about that. Yeah, like,
Who, what?
Yeah.
Well, yeah. I mean, the way that the whole thing happened from when we finally got all these sessions together, and the band kind of got to about, I think it was 16 really solidified ideas to record.
Yep.
At that point, the Bill Ward incident had happened that was just it was pretty well documented and bit surprising the way it went down. Yeah, and it was just like, oh, okay, well, this is happening. And by the time it got to the summer of 2012, we'd just had the Olympics in Britain, so we all came back to the States to get going, really on the final writing sessions. And there was a point where it's like, could kind of really do with making some decisions about getting recording now. Because Tony's had his triumphant return with the band
so
live.
Happy.
And he they did this fantastic club show in Birmingham where it was for Help for Heroes. It was 2,000 people, and they came on, and Tony was like hailed as a hero himself, and then they played Download that year, and it was spine tingling. So that summer, then it's like, okay, look, this is not being resolved. Nothing is being done in terms of any agreement with Bill. It's got to be moved forward. So Rick suggested a few people, and we went through them, and everybody was given a chance to come up with new. They were given a chance to play. There weren't that many drummers, but there was a few. They were given a chance to play some new songs without having heard what had been done before. It was just like, here's the song with no drums on it, and they were they were given 3 Sabbath songs or 4 Sabbath songs. So have a jam with the guys, and then let's have a play. And they were given them ahead of time. It was like they were given the option. One of them said, I don't need to hear it, I'll just come in and see what happens.
Oh my God, there was a balls on him.
Well, it's a little bit like, we'll see how creatively this can work. And it really did come down to a couple. And I remember probably the first time I had a real connection with Rick was when Brad came in.
Yeah.
And he quietly crept down. The guys were all in the other room with Brad, and they're playing through some stuff. And Rick came in and he said, this is the best I've heard these guys play this in forever. And I can't remember. It was one of the old songs. It might have been War Pigs. I can't remember.
Oh, my God.
But it was really good. And then it was down to kind of logistics of making it work with the other guy or not. He was a bit quicker at picking stuff up than Brad, but Brad had this kind of raw energy about him.
Yeah, dude.
And he took a bit longer to get the stuff, but he's so cool, and he was lovely, and we just ended up with the right decision being made, and it was so much fun.
We had that childlike joy. That's what I saw when I saw him play.
Well, the funny thing was as well, he's so easy to wind up, which of course makes him complete fodder for those guys.
They tortured him, didn't they?
Oh, totally. I mean, Tony's got the thing where he'll. I think you probably saw it the day of that the Who Cares recording where he tried to wind John Lord up that we'd sent him the wrong song. Yeah, he's always doing that, and
he's
Brad
cheeky.
was absolutely. Oh, he is. Brad was panic-stricken when he came in. Because Tony just got him and Geezer to start a completely different song. He said, did Mike not email you the arrangement? And he's got this look of sheer panic on his face.
Oh, he's got to be one of those people. He could make grown men cry very
No,
easily.
he does.
Very easily.
Very few people get him back, but it's funny when they do.
Yeah. Have you ever
Momentarily.
seen anyone get him back?
I've got him a couple of times.
Yeah.
Ronnie did. Ronnie got him brilliantly.
Oh, really?
Oh, God,
Okay,
yeah.
tell
Well,
us, come
not when I was with
Yeah.
him, but he said Tony never bothered trying to wind him up again. Tony had turned up at this house in Bel Air when they were doing the Heaven and Hell writing, and he turned up in this car and he'd found a dead snake, so he put it in Ronnie's toilet. And so Ronnie lifted the toilet lid, and there's this dead snake. So Ronnie's used to snakes because he lives in California. So he doesn't say anything. He takes the snake and he ties it to the door handle of Tony's car. So Tony opens the door to get in, and the snake flies out at him.
That is a solid turnaround of a burn.
Oh, totally. But yeah, and there's a few things that happen with Ian as well. But
because you did Ian's solo record too.
I did. Yeah, I did a track on Gillan's In with Tony, and but yeah, I mean, when they were with Sabbath, I mean, I think Ian says it in the documentary. It's probably the wildest time that they ever had on tour with Ian. Because, I can imagine they were very naughty boys.
Yeah. Those two, their eyes twinkle with mischief.
Oh, God, totally. Tony is completely up for the wind-up. I mean, it's funny. He says, Ozzy lives for it as well. Ozzy will try to make those guys laugh on stage.
Yeah.
He will try to get them cracking up. And you see it in all the movies and every night on stage. He just does a look, and you see Tony trying to concentrate, and he's suddenly doubled up trying to play a very majestic guitar solo. So but that's what they're like. It's like everybody gets the job done, but if you can't have a laugh doing it, what's the point? You know?
Well, that's another quote that I really like that I saw in the Quincy Jones documentary, which he said, and it wasn't, I thought it was him, but it actually was one of his composition teachers, and she said, your music can never be more or less than who you are as a human being. And I was like, wow, that's, and it's like when people say, oh, that person's a shithead, or they're violent, or they're horrible, you can separate the art from the artist. It's like, no, you can't. The artist is in the art. The artist is so firmly, their soul's in it. And I just thought, and that's what I've noticed. Like all the people, I've chosen everyone I've interviewed, and I've worked in music television and all these places where people don't usually get to choose. And there's just been so many wonderful people because they make wonderful music, and it's happened so often that you see great music being made by these really humble, wonderful people. And I mean, Tony's the absolute example of it. Like
he is,
Like,
and I've got some really good friends I've met through doing Sabbath. Yeah, and I've got people who because this was humbling. I mean, I did my first trip back to the States after I went through my terrible time. Yeah, and I went to a Black Sabbath convention before their final.
They have a convention?
There's a thing called Global Black Sabbath Convention. It's like it's a group of fans who put this together, and the guy that runs it with another friend of his. This guy, he's a guy called Ben Full, and he's a really, really cool guy. And he said to me, we're getting a convention together the night before the first of their two final shows at Madison Square Garden. So we're going to have 3 or 4 tribute bands. We're going to have each of the eras. So they had an a female band. They normally a Motley Crue band called Girls, Girls, Girls. Yeah. And they did a Dio set, and it was fucking brilliant. Awesome. And then they had Into the Void, did the Ozzy set. Yeah. And there was a couple of others, and he said during that evening, he goes, I want to bring Martin Popoff, the guy that writes the books. He's going to come up and talk a little bit. We're going to have Terry Welty and Mike Clement, who look after Tony and Geezer's stuff on stage. And he says, we want to talk to you. And I went, fuck off. No way am I standing up talking to people. I can't even cope with, eye contact because I was so shy. Not that you'd know it now. Yeah. So
you've settled into it now. It's good.
Yeah, I'm okay now. Yeah. But this is literally 12 months after coming out of the worst time of my life.
What year was this? Was this 2014?
End of 2014 was when I was hospitalised.
That's really funny because I had the worst year of my life that year as well. I had a complete nervous breakdown as well.
Shit year.
Yeah,
that was an awful year. Yeah.
It's confronting, man, when you go through those moments and when you get to the other side and you can look back and you go, oh my God, that I survived that. And
Oh, I mean, some of the people I know are like, God. I mean, I was lucky to be alive. I was given a couple of days to live. If things went well, I'd gone through some really stupid stuff, and I came out of it, and I was determined. There was a switch that switched, and I knew everything was going to be okay. And I knew that the only way to change was to confront stuff and to realise that it's okay to go out of your comfort zone as long as you're somehow able to recognise what's happening to you. And I mean, I do a lot of stuff about mental health now. I'm going to NAM in January, and I'm doing a talk on mental health in the industry because it's so important. Because I've got teenage. Definitely. Yeah. Well, like you see, I've got a teenage kid, 16, Josh, and he was like 12 when I was going through this. My 20-year-old son, Andrew, he was 16 when this shit was going down. And, we didn't talk for 10 months because he thought I turned into this monster, which I had, but a gentle one, but still this person that wasn't Dad. Yeah. And throughout all of that, once I got through the other side and didn't do too much damage except to myself, I got out of it, and I was like, well, what do I do? I was at a real crossroads, and this is after the biggest successes of my life so far. Yeah, it's like to go down to the bottom of the well, muddy river, and crawling through that, and then go. And I spoke to a friend of mine, Mike Banks, he's a great guy. And I said to him, I just want to chat. And that was a turning point. And he says, you want to do a masterclass? I went, oh, yeah, because, Mr. Nerves here really wants to get up in front of a bunch of people he doesn't know and start talking. Yeah. I said, never going to happen. And it was a brilliant turning point. Awesome. And I started doing these things. And one of the cathartic things about doing the Black Sabbath convention just before the final Sabbath gigs over in New York was that I had to stand up in front of about 200 Black Sabbath fans talking about my career. Yeah. And all night, people were coming up to me telling me how X album that I'd done, whether it was the Dio one or one of Tony's solo ones or 13, had stopped them from killing themselves.
Oh, my God.
And now that's a pretty heavy weight to have to bear when you're just going, well, I'm glad it stopped you, but God, you imagine the people that you've helped just by doing your job. And that puts a massive importance upon the art that you start to help create. Because someone said to me once, what's the approach? What makes recording, one of these albums with a big band different to doing a demo for someone? And I said, well, my approach doesn't change because I can either do it well or I can not bother. And I may as well do the job I do all the time. And the difference in perception for me is that even if it doesn't sell a single copy, if I do something with one of these bands' names on it, millions of people are going to hear what I did. Yeah. I've got a global audience for what I've just done, whether or not it sells. Nuts. So there's a bit of pressure on your shoulders to do the right job. And that's not motivating. That's just a stark reality of like,
if you're doing the Priest album.
I was feeling a bit tired last night. Oh, fuck it. I won't bother tidying up that vocal punch. Yeah. You can't do that. You just, and it becomes in sort of embedded in your work ethic of like, I'm going to do the best I possibly can. And this is what these guys have grown up with. You've got to learn to take their little babies that they're trying to nurture. You've got to take those and make them as important to you as it is to them. So it just comes back to that whole thing of like, God, the weight of what we do, because music is so emotional. Music is it's evoking an emotional response. It's like, what does that music make you feel? My favorite album ever is Animals by Pink Floyd. Now, it's probably, interestingly, the album that nobody listens to except most of the people I've learned I've had as friends since I nearly died. Most of the people that I speak to cite that as their favourite Pink Floyd album. So I'm obviously attracting people who are damaged, and repairing. But it's really interesting because you take an album like that and it's like, that is visceral Floyd. It's dark. I'm so pleased Roger Waters is doing a lot from it on his latest tour, because it's like, that's an incredible album. That's what makes you feel deeply about what's going on. Now, people go, I know a lot of people who have hurt themselves, who harm themselves, who have to deal with all sorts of shit in their lives. I've been through. I didn't self-harm. I self-harm with a bit too much vodka, if I'm honest, for a short time, and it was a short enough time that it still nearly killed me. But
I'm glad it didn't.
I'm glad too.
Yeah,
so are quite a few people.
Yeah,
but I learned from that.
Yeah.
But it was that thing of like, even at that time, you suddenly realise what people mean when they say, I actually feel uplifted when I listen to satanic death metal.
Yeah. Oh, I love it.
At all.
It's so.
Well, it doesn't for me, but
there's certain records. When I worked in music television, I would be really into listening to horrible lo-fi black metal just to clean my ears after. It was the Timbaland era. So I love Timbaland, but everything sounded like Timbaland. So
this is it, isn't it?
He was great.
Everything. But everything's got to have the yin to the yang. So if you're being flooded with something like euphoria of working on something, there has to be something to compare it to without analysing it too much. You've got to have that darkness to enjoy the light. There has to be that balance. I sound like fucking Obi-Wan now.
No. It's really funny because I've just pulled up a quote that says, okay, so this is a quote from she's an amazing scientist in the field of mood disorders. So she wrote basically the textbook about her illness, which is bipolar disorder, and she is one of the preeminent leading.
Oh, I've lost you.
Leading. Oh, can you hear me?
I just lost about 20 seconds of that.
That's okay.
She basically wrote.
Yeah, so she wrote she wrote a book called An Unquiet Mind, which is her experience of the illness. So she was a psychiatrist and a medical academic for a long time. Then she came out with a piece in the Washington Post that said, I have this, not only am I an eminent study of this illness, this is my experience. And her whole thing was about, and she wrote this book afterward, but it's about the silent, functional people among us who don't talk about it. And it's a really big issue that there aren't aspirational people because people feel like they can't come out. So her whole, what she's done, and she's written a series of books, including one about Robert Lowell, who's a poet and very, very flagrantly unwell. By one of the greatest poets who ever walked the earth. So I'll read you this quote because she's just an amazing writer, and in this era, and it's something I'm really interested in, creativity and mental illness and all that sort of stuff. Okay, so why would I want, so this is Kay Redfield Jamison from An Unquiet Mind. So why would I want anything to do with my illness? Because I honestly believe that as a result of it, I've felt more things more deeply, have had more experiences more intensely, loved more and been more loved, laughed more often for having cried more often, appreciated more the springs for all the winters, worn death as close as dungarees, appreciated it and life more, seen the finest and the most terrible in people, and slowly learned the values of caring, loyalty, and seeing things through. I've seen the breadth and depth and width of my mind and heart, and I've seen how frail they both are, and how ultimately unknowable they both are. Even when I have been at my most psychotic, delusional, hallucinating, frenzied, I have been aware of finding new corners in my mind and heart. Some of those corners were incredible and beautiful and took my breath away and made me feel as though I could die right then and the images would sustain me. Some of them were grotesque and ugly, and I never wanted to know they were there or to see them again. But always, There were for those new corners, and when feeling my normal self, beholden for that self to medicine and love, I cannot imagine becoming jaded to life because I know of those limitless corners with their limitless views. And I was like, dude.
Wow.
Yeah. I'm like, I don't think anyone has said it better.
That's unbelievable. That sums up, I think, everything about everything that we go through. If it's ever touched us in any way, that is incredible.
Yeah. I'll send you her book. It's just,
Oh, I'd love.
I should talk to you about this.
I was looking for something.
I've got a project that I want her to be a part of. Anyway, we'll talk about this after the show.
Yeah, definitely.
But,
that's so. I bet the bit about it informing you about how you've never felt so loved, because it's like suddenly you open yourself up. That moment that, in my case, you're told next 2 days are critical, man, you're fucking ill. You've got 6 things that individually could kill you, and you got them all.
Whoa.
And you go, oh, well, there's nothing I can do about it, so I better have every test under the sun. And any chance you can make my hand stop shaking? Yeah, we can deal with that.
Yeah, fuck.
Because the self-propelling thing. I mean, not to get into it too deep.
Well,
everybody was convinced I was an alcoholic.
Yeah.
I wasn't. I was using alcohol towards the end of a very bad period of time to take me away from everything that was just uncontrollably destroying me. And that one thing where it was like, I'm actually in control of now, not shaking my hand shaking. That whole thing of people judging me from that nerves, the anxiety, everything that was self-fulfilling prophecy, that suddenly stopped. And that was that moment where I knew everything was going to be okay.
And those moments are so important because they happen all the time. Things do get better. You do get through it. If you out there listening are having a hard time, like this too shall pass is real. Like, and you absolutely will never love your life the way you will.
And do you know what also happens is you become very, very aware of other people going through it.
Yeah.
And you're suddenly you're in a situation where you have to find out more, because knowing what you know, you can't interfere with what's going on, but you feel duty bound to try and at least find some way of stopping them from not being able to control whatever's happening in their lives, because we've lost too many Chris Cornells. They're the poster boys.
My heart
Chris
fucking
Cornell
explodes for that.
And Chester. I did right in the middle of my high period of going through End of Sabbath, halfway through producing Priest, I did this wonderful interview with a friend of mine about my career thus far.
Yeah,
and it was the day after Mike Shipley committed suicide, which we think he committed suicide. Yeah. Now, for those who don't know, Mike Shipley was Mutt Lange's right-hand man, his engineer. Yeah. He recorded the foot stomps on We Will Rock You. He was working at Basing Street at the time. So he had a history of stuff, and Mutt took him on, and he was the guy that engineered for Mutt for years. And I sat there going, what would make someone want to commit suicide? How could things get that bad? Look at what he's got. And then literally 2 years later, I'm in that position going, why don't people understand why them saying, but you're at the top of your game, you're doing this. What have you got to feel a bit down about? Those immortal words, And you're just like, so it's a really incredibly massive topic, and something that's so important given what the youth are going through. I saw it as heartbreaking. I did something this summer for my son's school where it was his college, where we just had an open door thing where mental health week, everybody can come in, they don't have to say anything. We were all talking about our grand interventions and all this stuff and what had happened to us, and you've got 17-year-old kids going, I'm having to look after my mum who's using drugs. My dad committed suicide, and I'm trying to prepare myself for auditions where I know I'm going to get rejected. And it's like, I've got no problems compared to you.
Yeah, this is the thing. Have you heard of a guy called Johan Hari? No, he's one of the most interesting people. He's a journalist and a writer.
Right.
And he's just written a book about that one of the reasons why people have never been sadder or more lonely, or that mental illness is where it's at, is actually a very primal thing that we're lacking. Very key primal things. We've never been more lonely. We lack this sense of community. And he tells this great story. I heard a podcast with him recently where he talked about this woman who was meant to be mentally ill and needed to be medicated. And they were in this big like housing estate with all these kind of low income people. And they were going to kick they were going to kick her out of the area. And then suddenly they introduced everyone in the complex. And then they suddenly found all these connecting points between them. And then everyone in there suddenly found a reason to be happy again and found everyone's mental health got better because we're tribal fucking animals. We used to travel in packs. The way we live right now is unhealthy. So it's like, it's such an important issue. And, you know, and I think it does relate to what we're talking about because so many people in the music style that Black Sabbath invented. So people use, as you said, people use this music as a way to deal and to emotionally process things.
Well, it makes you feel part of community. I mean, my mum and dad, thankfully, they're still alive. They're in their 70s. And I was talking to mum about these, you know, these massive metal festivals that you go to. And I said, I've never felt safer in amongst 100,000, you know, when I'm in amongst 100,000 people who are all very, very different, and you know, they're from all walks of life. And she related a story. She said when she was walking down the station with the old-fashioned pushchair with my older brother when he was still a toddler, you know, or not even toddling, she said she walked down this station. So this is like 1966, and she said a couple of bikers helped her onto the train while all the men in suits ignored her.
It's so funny, hey.
Isn't that funny? Because she would be freaked out by a bunch of metalheads around her. Yeah. But they're the community. They're the family. And it is what brings us together. You know, it's and music does. I mean, music pulls us all together.
And you're in the inner family. You're in the family within the family. Like, it's, you know what's really funny? I when I walk around the city in down the business district of Sydney, I see all the men in the 3-piece suits, and I always think they're like all Patrick Bateman. Like they're all like American Psycho. Like I've never hung out with suits, so I'm like, I could never go out with any of you. You all look like, I just think you all murder strippers, and you know, there's something. I think
they probably do.
Yeah, no. Well, this is the thing. Let's be real. But it's also being people who are ascribed to non-traditional values, and the whole industry and in recording studios, on tour, like the world that you're a part of, the people who are just as much a part of it as the musicians themselves, because you're just as much, you're in the room, like your soul is on the record too, and all the other people around it. And I think sometimes I think about it, like people don't realize that you don't have to be an artist to be in this world. No. It's like, and the whole thing about all this world, and this is just my limited perspective, but it's about who you are. You can be weird as fuck. You can be a really unusual, non-functional member of capitalist society. Maybe you don't fit into anything we're meant to be doing. You're not ticking any boxes or being a good consumer. Maybe you're a weird-ass person. But if you're a good person, you can get the job done, and you're respectful of everyone else, you can live in rock and roll forever, you know?
Oh, totally. I think it goes,
obviously talent comes with it, but
it goes across every genre except for normal society, you know. I say normal with massive parentheses or inverted commas, whatever it is. Dad'll be going, "Oh, you've got your grammar wrong again." But it's you know, the normality is what's defined by the establishment, I guess. And you know, I'm not a political person, but it's like the reason that that we all aspire to whatever it is, we want to feel part of family. I think it's horrendous that we have to spend so much time with technology around us. You know, I mean, I love the fact that we have social media that keeps us connected in one sense, but there is nothing better than being around people. We did a thing. I do the odd videos for this site called recordproduction.com,
Yeah.
which is this guy Mike who got me to do my first masterclass. He's been running that for nearly 20 years.
Awesome.
And he started out of this thing. He sells SSL consoles for a living. He is the sort of the main UK guy for SSL recording consoles. So he knows everybody in the industry.
Oh, wow.
Certainly around the UK, everybody. And so that to him is his normality. So he started doing videos and trying to bring on a bit of interviews with people who make records and the art of record production. So I do a lot of that. And we got together at Abbey Road about a month ago. And there was about 50 or 60 of us. And we had John Leckie there, he did Wish You Were Here and some of the Beatles and Radiohead's The Bends and some XTC stuff. It's incredible. I was just so thrilled to chat to him, and he was funny as fuck.
Yeah.
And so we had a day like that, and we had him there, and we had just loads of people, and everybody came out of that day going, well, I thought it was cool just going to Abbey Road, but the coolest thing about it was getting to hang out with all the misfits, because we don't get to do that anymore. And I could spend my life mixing, but I don't want to, because I want to work with people. Yeah. Because, you can't get people to attend mixes anymore. And this whole bullshit of... Well, you see, I had it. It was quite funny. When Ronnie came up to do a writing session once, he had so much shit from one of the immigration officials in London. Yeah. He said, what are you here for? Because I'm going to do songwriting. Yeah. Well, why can't you do that by sending, MP3s backwards and forwards?
Immigration said that?
Yeah. He said, well, you can't. It's a two-way process. Yeah, well, surely the technology allows you. And it's like, Jesus. So the next time he said, when he came through, he said, I've come to wish a friend of mine happy birthday. Because he said I wasn't getting into that conversation.
So that's acceptable. Who the fuck are immigration?
Exactly. So it was really an indicative thing of what people assume, you see. So for that to happen to Ronnie, can't you just send MP3s backwards and forwards? It's like, well, no, because this is a fluid thing that happens when you're mixing. It's all very well saying I'm going to send you an MP3 of where I'm at. If you come back to me and go, can you just turn the last bit of echo on the lead vocal on the second verse up a dB? I'll go, well, yeah, I can, but what's that going to do to what follows it? Yeah. How about you come and sit next to me and I do that and you go, oh no, that was shit. Why don't you try this? Yeah. Instead of waiting 20 minutes for an answer to then have this, I've gone out for lunch, I've taken a shit, the dog's got diarrhea or something. It's like, let's get in a room together. And the funny thing is, it is totally, because everything is reactionary. Everything has to be a reaction to something that's happening. How do you get that vocal to sit above that incredibly dense thing while I move something out of the way when I need to? Yeah, it's a reaction. It's not about a prescribed series of things that you write down in a book. It's you reacting to something that happens, because it's got to be emotional. You've got to sit at the beginning of a song and by the end of it go, fuck, wow. Yeah.
By the way, you're way more on mic just then. Just saying. As a
Thank you.
No one's ever told you that today.
No. No, it's funny, but when I did that record for that New Zealand band, I thought we weren't breaking the mold, but I produced it. I went out to New Zealand for a couple of stints, and then I mixed it in England. But we had a Skype conversation going on for 4 hours a day, and I was broadcasting the mix across a private internet stream to the singer in the band. Yeah. We were mixing live. Yeah. Because we had to make it work somehow. Yeah, I mean, Clear Mountain was doing it with Bryan Adams on some stuff, because Bryan tends to live in London, so that he'd be basically mixing live in LA to London. Wow. Because you have to have that. You've got to have communication. It gets back to that thing we were talking about earlier. You've got to have communication, because how can you do emotion using written word?
Because and it's about ears as well.
That you did was incredible.
Yeah. Oh, she just
but that's written word to be read.
Yes, and she is a student of poetry. I've watched her talks as well. I'm always excited to have people go down these paths and communicate by whatever means necessary. But that's why this is a show, really.
Yeah.
Because this is what I love doing, and I think this is the point of being alive, is storytelling. It's what we can do that the other animals can't. Like, we should
Well, that's
take
the thing about lyrics and vocalists. It's like you no idea how many bands don't give a shit about what their vocalist is singing about.
It's just mind-boggling.
And then you get the vocalist and you start going, well, have you thought about maybe, you're struggling to sing that phrase. Why don't you shorten it a little bit? But let's find a way of telling that same story, but maybe with less syllables, or let's find some alternate ways of telling it. And I've had them look at me and go, you're the first person that's ever given a crap about my lyrics. And it's like, well,
that's so cool.
Yeah, we need to make this the most important thing, surely, because otherwise it's just a shit instrumental.
Yeah. It needs to matter, and you need to feel it. And God, singing is such a fine art. Like, I'm 2 years into learning, and I only really had a resonance moment like last week. of understanding resonance, and it's like it's such a fucking art form. Like,
well, thankfully I don't sing because nobody wants to hear that. It's so wonderful when you see it done well, and when you see it. Yeah. And you've worked with the greatest vocalists ever. Like, what's a memorable songwriting experience with Ronnie James Dio? Like, because I know you said he comes in with things underlined and all that stuff. Yeah.
I interviewed him once, and I was like, and I saw him play, and I was like,
brilliant.
Well, he's like a pocket rocket. He was wearing wearing velvet pants.
Funny.
So glorious.
He was
70s.
Lovely.
Yeah.
I mean, he and I really hit it off. It was just so funny.
Yeah.
Yeah. I got dumped in LA. I didn't get dumped, but we'd done a bit of recording. We did the best of his the Dio years back in about 2006, and then we started working on Heaven and Hell 10 years ago. In fact, it came up on my memories that Sunday was the 2nd of December.
Oh, wow.
And 10 years ago we started recording the Devil You Know on the 2nd of December. So it's 10 years ago we were doing this. Nice. So he and I really hit it off. And when I first went to LA, I knew him enough that we'd worked on a few things together. And his personal assistant had to go off on tour with the Offspring. So it was just Ronnie and me. So we weren't due to start working till the Monday, but I was going to prep his home studio with him. And we just started taking off all around LA, like over to Guitar Center, down to Best Buy and shit like that, buying shit for the studio to make the session work. And it was hilarious because he's there in his big sort of Mercedes Jeep and me in the passenger seat. And we'd go and we'd come back and
he's a rock star.
Sit for a couple of... Yeah, exactly. And, he's like, we walk into Guitar Center and they're like, oh, God, holy shit, it's Ronnie James Dio. I think I'm going to shit myself. And Ronnie would go, well, can you serve us before you do that? Because the smell will be goddamn awful. But he was so down to earth. But writing-wise, what killed me, and I know I've told this many, many times.
No one is ever going to be tired of this, by the way.
The song Bible Black.
Yeah.
Is and I took that multi-track out to Florida recently to show the students, and we got to listen to it first time since it was done 10 years ago, and the entire section of his vocal all the way up until the band kicks in with the don't go out, don't look back, you're reading from the Bible Black. When that first happens, all the vocal up to that point was one afternoon in May 2008 when he came downstairs, and Tony and Geezer and I had been downstairs working on the music.
Yeah.
He'd been up in his kitchen with a cassette player and a pad. And he'd been working on some ideas. I know, it was brilliant.
No.
And he came downstairs and he goes, hey guys, I've got some lyrics to try. So Tony and Geezer said, all right, well, we'll go upstairs and leave you to it. So he comes down with his handwritten pad of lyrics and he goes, let's just run it. And he sang through Bible Black with the lyrics that he had. And that entire first section is what stayed on the album, because it was the first time he ever sang it with the backing track in his home, and he got out what he wanted to sing. And That was it. And when we got to final recordings at Rockfield, he said, I really, really love the beginning of this track. He goes, there's just one word that I kind of stretch it a little bit tuning-wise. I said, well, we'll just see if we can tweak that down.
Yeah.
So I did, and he was like, cool, it's done for me. So that was a moment of, there's a guy who is not too precious. He's emoted what he wants to, and he's kind of almost compartmentalized that into being the performance he wanted to give. And that was it. There was none of this, oh, God, I can't possibly have that. That wasn't recorded well enough, which it was recorded well enough, obviously.
Yeah.
But, that, and it wouldn't have mattered if it wasn't. We'd have made a way of effecting it. But it was that thing of like, this is what I want to do. Let's do it. And it's a big lesson, which I've done forever. But again, it's one of those important things where we've got the technology to record till, we get hit by the next meteorite, because we've got hard drive space for eons. So why would you never, ever stop recording something? What's the most important thing you can do in a studio? Make sure you've got sounds ready to go and record the fuckers. Because it's like, there is no excuse to trying to be clever about salvaging disc space. Record everything. Just be in record. Let these people realise that whatever they're doing is not going to get lost. When we were writing the 13 sessions, I would have a little Zoom micro recorder and a laptop. Yeah, they're sat in the control room recording everything that's going on in the control room the entire time. I have got hours and hours and hours of the writing process of
Holy
13.
Shit. People would kill people for that.
Oh, there's some funny stuff in there. I mean, there's some moments when they're discussing their school days where you're literally like, you're meant to be working, and then Tony goes, do you remember that fucking teacher? He goes, I didn't even walk through the classroom door and he'd tell me, oi, Iommi, get out. Like, I haven't done anything. And they would start talking about school days. And you're just like, this is priceless.
Well, that's the thing. The greatest rock and roll stories will never be told outside those walls. We can get a little window into it, but the real
the funny
magic
thing is, it's just the laughter. The laughter is amazing with those people. And it's never any different, And you get these really, really. I mean, Kane, bless him, the singer in Sonic Alter, the New Zealand band. We got to do vocals, and he's a really funny guy, really good friend of mine. And he'd be going, "Come on, we got to do the next line." And I'm going, "Oh no, you do realise rushing me never works. Hurry up, I want to sing." Oh, you made it even worse. I'm going to make you wait another 30 seconds now. And he was getting so frustrated. He goes, "You're such a cunt," and then we'd laugh, and then he'd put out a performance.
Yeah. You knew what's about that whole and another thing that I'd be interested with you is the ability, and I think with the artists you've dealt with, the ability to walk away the moment where you say this is done. That's got to be its own art form. And I expect with these kind of artists, they've said this is done and had a lot of applause after they thought it was done. So you would over time trust that instinct of when it's done. But where does that go?
You've just got to go. I think it's like with most things. I mean, I pull back to when I talk to students about it, when they're all sat there looking intently at a curve on a screen and drawing automation in, and they're looking to see just how they could refine it a bit more, when they haven't rewound and played it from start to finish to actually realise that the guitar solo is barely audible because they've been concentrating on it so much. So by stepping away from it every now and again, and the reason I say it to students is because I say, back in the old days when we were steam driven, when we were using tape and we were using consoles a lot, we used to have to work really hard. So we used to have to go, okay, the vocalist gets really pissed off every time he hears that particular guitar lick before he comes in, but it's on the same track as the rhythm guitars, which means that I've now got to, with my left hand, mute that guitar lick and punch in a quarter of a second later with my right hand. So I've got to do that every time we do this fucking piece of music. But you did it. Nowadays, you just automate it. You just go bang, straight in, done. we've got it easy. Kids of today have got it easy. But, it's really true. So you've got this ability to do everything. If something is wrong, if something doesn't sound right, if it's not how you believe it should be, fix it and move on. Then go back, go and grab a cuppa, grab a beer, whatever you want to do, come back in, shut your eyes and press play. Listen to it. Listen to it as the piece of music rather than, is that snare drum bright enough on that hit? Just listen to see if anything sounds wrong. Does it still have in the energy build? Does it have emotion? Does it feel like it's just going through the motions?
Yeah.
Again, that song, Bible Black, is a fucking classic. You start from the beginning, you get to the end, and you realise that by the time they've got through the guitar solo, which extends, goes through a couple of turnarounds, you get to a third verse. It's not even a verse. It's a completely different piece of music that is a verse, but the riff is based on something else. It's got this energy to it. It's like some people would have just copied and pasted verse 2 and gone, bang, there we go. That's the music that sits behind that. Oh, no, this is Sabbath, as it was.
You haven't done much cutting and pasting, have you? Like,
not
with them?
particularly, no. Only in writing.
Yeah.
In writing, you sort of go, okay, let's see what would happen there. And then they go out and they play it. Now, you listen to God is Dead. Every verse of that is different. The riff in that verse, but each time has a different little aspect to it to make it different. It's all about, I wasn't expecting that. That's cool. That's just built up a bit of tension. It's all getting really heavy now. Something's going to happen, and it's either the big majestic chorus or, knowing Sabbath, they go into a completely different time signature.
That's what's so interesting about them, hey?
Yeah. It's just about, so the letting go aspect of it is, have we done the job? Is there anything that anybody would want to change? Yeah. And very quickly, people just, they're great at it. The good guys are great at being sent something and going, I think it's really good. And you wait for them to say, but very often they don't.
That's
very
great.
Often they're like, no, I really, really like that. And they're always listening for the other person as well. That's another key. That's something, that's a piece
good
of
musician.
advice I give.
Yeah.
Yeah. Well, also when someone, because it's quite an art trying to listen into a mix when you're trying to engineer.
Yeah.
The thing that someone said to me very early on, which is something I try to impart, is if you want to hear if the snare drum's too loud, listen to the bass guitar or the vocal. Anything but the snare drum.
Yeah. So
try and focus on something else all the way through. And if this fucking annoying snare drum's bugging you all the way through, it's too loud or it's the wrong sound. So you discipline yourself into not concentrating on what you're listening for. You listen to everything else and see whether or not that is an issue. That's
really good advice.
Yeah, and that's what the guys in the bands do. They listen to the other musicians.
Wow.
And I mean, in terms of a writing thing as well, just as a kind of thing with the Dio sessions, listening to Vinny and Geezer play off each other, listening to Vinny do a drum fill and Geezer go, oh, let's have a listen to that again. Oh, I can do something over that. Or Geezer would do a little lick and Vinny would go, I fucking love that you did that. I'm just going to accent that with this. So then there's no copy and paste going on there because you've got a band of musicians all trying to get their little, I'm pumping away on an E string, but I'm going to put a lick in here. And someone goes, that's really cool. Bang, I'm going to throw that on top.
So is that how they work, like the rhythm section, like in Sabbath and stuff? What's like auto? So, I mean, Tony kind of brings ideas and then how does it work? Like, how does Geezer, for example, fit into this whole dynamic?
Well, he's very, very much there from the, day one. He's quite nervous and insular about stuff. So he'll sit there, he'll just sort of be noodling away, kind of just putting some bass notes in the mix just to give it some low end. And then he does this thing where if he messes up a note, because nobody knows where Tony's going next. I mean, we've all got a bit of a clue sometimes, knowing it, but he will suddenly go completely off-road. And so then Geezer will play a note that's like completely wrong, and he'll go, oof. And we all start laughing because he does his face as well.
He's a funny bloke.
He's really funny. So he'll do that, but he's got he's very vocal about what he does and doesn't like, and he Sabbath is in their DNA, therefore he knows what he wants Sabbath to be.
Yeah.
So it took a long time for me to work out how his bass should sound.
Yeah.
Because it's not what people would think his bass should sound like.
Yeah.
Apart from the fact that, like with most brilliant musicians, he picks up a bass and it sounds like he's a butler.
Yeah.
So it comes from the fingers. But it's just the meshing of the parts. To be honest, the drums come last.
That's interesting.
It's only because it's led by the riff.
Yeah.
I mean, even Bill.
I love that everyone's
say,
following Tony. He'll just go off road.
Yeah, well, that's right.
It's such a beautiful way of putting it.
He's a shitbag as well because he doesn't do it deliberately. But when we first started doing some writing sessions, Geese and Bill weren't involved. The first time I went to Ozzy's house, we were just kind of getting back on a roll with Ozzy, and we were just going to do what we were doing in England, which was working Tony and me, computer, drum programming, bass, all that stuff, and get some vocal ideas down for Ozzy. Well, then he says, let's just jam it out. So he goes, we'll get Tommy Clefitas, we'll get him on drums. Do we need a bass player? And Tony goes, oh, no, Mike plays bass, he'll do it. And I'm like, oh, you twat. So
Holy
that's
shit,
fine. And I'm in the room playing bass
Holy
for a week
shit.
with these guys. But Tony's a shitbag because I'm trying to follow what he's doing. And he's trying to get his sound. So he's got his back to me, hasn't he? Because he's like, I just got to tweak the amp. So I'm like trying to follow where he's going on the neck.
Yeah.
Nothing, And he's looking round sort of, gotcha. And Ozzy's just wondering what the hell's going on as he does. But it's really funny. But yeah, it's totally, and that's the thing about, getting back to you throw your dicks out on the table to be judged. It doesn't matter if you screw up. It really doesn't. Nobody's there judging because you might do something that is genius. Yeah. You might take a couple of notes and go, listen to that. Listen to what that does to the tension in that particular part. And I mean, very early days of doing the writing sessions with Tony, he'd always go, I hope you're recording this. Or make sure you get this. He doesn't even bother now. He knows it's being recorded. Yeah. He's just freed to play. Yeah. And that's
all you can do, really, isn't it?
Yeah.
Wait, you've got a little bit of scratchiness. I feel like
that's my beard.
Yeah, that's what it is. I've been like, I don't know whether I should tell him.
I've got one of these cheap Apple headsets.
I'm like, do I tell him?
Shall I do this a bit more?
Yeah. I've been trying to work out. I'm like, what is it?
You've got the Millennium Falcon taking off every now and again behind you.
Yeah. Oh, I'm sorry. Yeah, I'm moderately under the flight path.
Moderately.
Well, once upon a time when I was 21, we moved into a house that my best friend said she'd gone to before we moved in. She had not. Right. And we were so directly under the fucking flight path, we had to stop talking mid-sentence all the time. However, there's a flip to that. They had insulated the shit out of the houses overall. And one night for her 21st birthday, we had a friend of ours who did staging. Bring an entire rig that you would put in a pub into our living room, and a band called Crack Whore played that night. And we only had the cops come after they did a 20-minute John Bonham style drum solo at 4:00 in the morning.
Brilliant.
The lady police officer who showed up, our singer who was wearing a smoking jacket and winkle pickers, or at least a smoking jacket, leaned very languidly against the door frame and pulled out one earplug after another and invited her in.
Oh, brilliant.
She declined, but we didn't get in much trouble, and
awesome.
It was a very memorable time. So that's my fond flight path story.
I used to live under the flight path, but it's right. You sort of just get used to it, and you just stop sentence. Yeah. And then you pick up when it's gone over.
But it's like everything, you get used to standing in a room with Tony Iommi all the time.
Exactly.
While everyone else would cry. You know, like
No, he makes me cry.
yeah. Well, it's just I don't know. I think it's really nice to hear, you know, the stories from the family. You know,
Yeah.
And this is, you know, it's, and we're all. I think if you're in the family, if you're in the inner sanctum, you know what to keep close to your chest.
Yeah.
And that's the art. And this is the art, you know, this is the world of interviews, you know. You gotta know what, yeah, we all, there's spheres of stories and spheres of insights. And okay, I know I've kept you for ages. Just had one thing that's kind of like in my head. You know, talking about your style, which is very, you know, you making people feel comfortable and humor.
Yeah.
And then like Rick Rubin being almost like, he seems like he does the opposite, where he wants to throw, like, challenge and throw something in the breaks and do all of that. Do you think there are like specific schools of thought with this, or is every single producer or engineer different?
I think everybody's got they've got an end goal they want to get to.
Yeah.
I think Rick's approach is, it comes from a really good place. It comes from a real musical fandom.
Yeah.
I don't think he's brilliant in crowds. So he's kind of there's me not being articulate. He's not very articulate about the way he wants to get around it, but he knows he can throw stuff at people and evoke a reaction. But one thing he is incredibly true, because you can, he's got a really good memory as well. So you can throw, he can say, play me 3 different versions and I'll tell you the one I like. And you could play him, and that could be a sound. It could be something indefinable, but he'll tell you which one, and he'll pick it again and again. And if you played him the same 3 things a week later, he'd still pick the same one, because he knows what he wants to hear. Yeah. He's I think the misunderstood part about him, and I think that's where the Corey Taylor stand-up show really said it, was, you know, he said, would he make another record with him? Never. But I think that Slipknot album was one of their best albums they did, and Corey says that. So something in what he does gets there. It's really frustrating, and it doesn't always leave the artist having had the best experience in the world. And you know, I know there's an awful lot. I mean, I defend Rick a lot. He doesn't need defending, but I defend my time with him because I learned a lot. But I still maintain that the way that some of the stuff that ended up either as the bonus tracks for 13 or the ones that came out on the tour, you know, the extra EP, they should have sounded different. I think he got 13 right. But I think they went a little bit too far with trying to make it so much like the early stuff. I mean, it's like,
he's
that's
done that
where
a few times. Hey, I've heard him doing that a lot.
Dichotomy. That thing I said earlier about, you know, when he said that, and I guess I never really finished that part. I went off on a tangent, but it's like you can take people and say, a lot of people love 13 and they go, it's incredible, and a lot of people go, it's fucking awful, it's really modern production. And I don't think it's modern production at all, so I don't know what defines that. And some people absolutely detest it. Some people love it. Some people detest The Devil You Know, and some people love it. And you just go, fine, you know, that's what it is. That you don't have to like everything. But he's got an immense hit rate, but he's also got an immense fail rate.
And he doesn't seem to be someone people use consistently.
No.
Like, they're like, oh, we'll do that. We'll do a Rick Rubin thing. But you don't hear of Rick Rubin producing 6 albums of anyone's.
No, it's funny. And you get like, I guess Kerry, unless it wasn't Kerry, maybe it was Tom, but from Slayer saying, you know, Rick had run his course. He was no longer producing them. He'd sort of moved into exec producing them. And they said when he did that, we weren't interested. So he obviously brings something to people. But I think there's a misunderstanding of what people think a producer should be. And I think that's the other thing, you know, should a producer be a musician? I'm a musician. musician.
Yeah.
I find it immensely difficult to imagine a producer that just thinks technical, but there are some out there. And I think, well, yeah, but you're concentrating wholly on the wrong things. Because, I mean, to me, any great songwriting, one of my favorite pieces of music to play to people about an immense performance, a great vocal and a great song is The Last Resort by the Eagles from their live album when they got back together. It's an incredibly emotive performance. And they're like, the Eagles? And I'm like, listen to it. This is incredible. I'm about that. Rick is. There are some producers that wouldn't listen to the songs. They just go, oh, yeah, but listen to how well those drums sit together. Listen to how powerful that sounds. And I'm like, yeah, where's the hook?
Yeah.
I'm paraphrasing Frank Sinatra, but there's a thing where people go on and on about the technology. And I say nobody walks down the road humming the sound of a vocal preamp.
It's just like it's them listening for them, not for the listener.
Yeah.
And
it's audiophile wankers.
Yeah, and I've been in the room with people like when I've been shooting sessions and stuff, and I've got a friend. I've got a really lovely friend, Richard Belkner, who's an amazing engineer and producer, and his wife is an amazing musician and composer as well. So we're seeing them make records together. I saw them; she was producing and he was engineering, and watching them work is absolutely beautiful. But they're very much of the school of they're musicians. Like he's a jazz musician by trade, so the sessions with him are always warm and there's always kindness in the air. Whereas I've got another friend who's a producer and his whole thing is breaking people. He's like, oh, I broke them, and it's like I just don't think that's what we're meant to do as people. I mean clearly like that whole thing works from time to time, but I don't think I think there's something very ego-driven about it.
It's making yourself more important than the artist. Yeah, and I think that's bollocks. I really do.
There's so much funny stuff around producers and the mystery and the whole thing. There's this great I love this quote in the Courtney Love's book about Steve Albini. They did not get along.
I'm not surprised.
And she said the only way Steve Albini would like me is if I was from the East Coast, played the cello, had big tits, wore tight black turtlenecks, had all matching luggage, and never said a word. And I was like,
wow.
It's such a beautiful beautiful image. Like that's not Courtney Love.
That's really funny. Because I mean he's kind of anti-producer, isn't he?
Yeah, totally.
And I get where he's coming from, and he makes some valid points about certain stuff. But I'm just like, well, each to their own. But I would far rather be in a room with someone like, I don't know, Brian Eno or George Martin. Yeah.
Who are your heroes? Who are your like? Yeah.
Well, I love from a mixing point of view, it's Andy Wallace.
Yeah. Oh, dude.
Followed I'd say almost half and half, him and Bob Clearmountain.
Yeah, he did a masterclass, Wallace, a couple of years. He did that mixing masters out the South
amazing. Yeah, I mean, Bob's amazing because he's the epitome of musical mixing. Yeah, and he's incredibly humble. And Andy is just brilliant. I mean, he's like. That's one of the things. Talk about turning points. When we finished 13, Brad gave me a copy of their 20th anniversary box set of the Rage album. Yeah. And he said, "Oh, I've left you a present in the kitchen." Oh, no, that's awesome. And I took it home with me. When I got out of hospital and I was having I'm up at 3 a.m, don't know what to do with my life. I can't move. I'd got 50% muscle loss, all this shit. And I'm sat there going, what do I do? And I looked down and I saw the Rage box set and I opened it and I put the first side on the turntable. Yeah. Because I was like, let's have a listen, And I put it on and I just went, what the fuck have you been doing? Listen to that. That is a band playing in a room with a small invited audience. PA turned up. They've just fucking rocked the shit out of this studio. And Andy Wallace has mixed it on an SSL with a couple of reverbs and shitloads of fader moves. Why does that sound so good? Because of all of that I've just said. And that was like turning point. And I started listening to shit I'd done back in the 90s and I'm going, this all sounds of a similar vibe.
Yeah.
Everything that the industry's doing is going towards a point of trying too hard.
Yeah.
And that
Rage
got me
album.
back. So
Oh my
it's
God.
incredible.
The first
So,
Rage Against the Machine album is easily one of the greatest rock
It's
albums
brilliant.
of like modern times. And I've been talking.
It's brilliant.
We've actually talked about them a lot lately on this show. We spoke to Sunny Singh, who runs Hate 56, who's recorded 3,000 hardcore shows. And the first, he's obsessed with, well, like my entire generation, we're obsessed with Rage Against the Machine. But it's like I was saying to him, it's our soul music. If you're a child of the late 20th century, early 21st century, shit is fucking dark. We're mad. That is our soul music, you know.
Absolutely. Like, and I love what they're doing as Prophets of Rage as well.
Yeah.
I mean, I think that's incredible.
It's just
it's brilliant. And that's the thing. So, you know, from that point of view, I think that if there's someone to aspire to, it's someone who is as musical as Andy Wallace. In terms of production, I guess, God, it's like people that let the band do what they do.
Yeah.
You know, I mean, nobody's really ever told Pink Floyd what to do. No. I don't think. Well, except Roger.
Yeah.
But, you know, they kind of knew what they were doing. I think old school people. I mean, George Martin was a proper guy, you know. I'm not the biggest Beatles fan in the world, you know. I don't take them as the Bible.
Yeah, I've never gotten into them. I don't know if I'm allowed to say that.
Of course you are.
I don't know.
It's a generation thing, and if you love that kind of, if you like that. I
was really into Nine Inch Nails when I was 16. You know, like.
Well, there you go then.
Yeah, like.
I mean,
the Beatles.
So there you go. That's taking you exactly. That takes you back there to see the Nine Inch Nails. Takes me through Trent Reznor back to Grohl and the Foos, you get back to Butch Vig. So Butch Vig, fucking brilliant.
What do you think of Atticus Ross and Reznor doing like soundtracky stuff? What do you think of
I think it's great because it's like listen to what Trevor Rabin did. You know, I mean, that was Stuart Copeland.
Yeah.
I mean, okay, we all recognise the Equalizer. You know, that was Stuart with his Fairlight.
Yeah.
But brilliant. I love it. I mean, I love soundtrack music. Hans Zimmer. I know he's a misunderstood person. So Hans Zimmer, he's the guy that I would equate to a Rick Rubin-esque kind of person, only with a bit more personality. And only because he's very German and he can't tell jokes because he is very German.
Yeah.
And I've seen him live doing his big orchestral rock show. That is so metal. Yeah. When they did Wonder Woman soundtrack, it was like being at a metal gig. It was unreal. Awesome. And so this is going on. And so Hans is the guy that is at the helm. And it's his name on the project. And it doesn't matter if he's got 30 other people helping write little melodies and whatever. He's the guy that has to please the director. He's the producer of that music. And that's a massive job for someone to do. So pulling those people together and actually delivering that. And he's the guy that has got way more pressure on him than any of us because he's doing God knows how many movies a year. He's doing franchises, so he's got to up his game and still maintain all that shit, you know. So he's a producer to me, and he's a genius. He's an absolute genius, and so in amongst it all, there are some people that can pull it all together, and then there are the ones that get put into the situations like I've been put in, where you're the guy in the big chair, but all you're doing is helping everybody do what they do and kind of herding sheep.
But
almost.
that's kind of wonderful. Like,
you know, it's brilliant.
And I think there's a lot of confusion around creativity, especially if you're not someone who's a part of it, about how all this dynamic works and like the hands on the keys versus the energy in the room. And producing is a particularly funny thing because it is so ethereal and it might not look like, you know, to the layman, like what the dynamic is almost undefinable, like with and getting everyone on that same page. And it goes with directing. Probably film directing is a closer
it is absolutely
to music producing because film producing is fucking dealing with bullshit. But directing is in that same way of creatively
it is
playing the orchestra and being the conductor and all that sort of stuff. And What do you think? Okay, I've got a question. With the whole era of that we live in, where a lot of people don't write their own songs and all that sort of stuff. So, and I was a very angry person working in the music industry for a long time.
I can't believe that.
Yeah, it's shocking. I'm a very zen person these days, but once upon a time.
I know. It just makes me laugh because most of us are.
I was such a strop.
Too.
I was like working
Especially
in
when
music
I'm
TV. I'm
hungry.
like, Well, I was working in music TV. They're like, no one likes metal. It was hilarious. I used to work on the website of the music TV station. They said, oh no, you're not talent to have a show on TV, but you can put it on YouTube. Yeah, that station doesn't exist anymore. YouTube, we're still doing pretty good.
That's right.
but I used to sit in our online forum all day and talk to all the kids about metal. That's all we talk about. They didn't know. They're like, oh, it was hilarious. We'd spend the whole day. They're like, yeah, they're not actually playing these records on the show. They made me cancel on Rob Halford. That was the end of our metal show. They said you're spending too much time on this, and so you have to go and tell Sony Music. An odd thing, it's like, they're one of our biggest partners. They're like, no, you have to cancel on doing a music video special with Rob Halford. I cried for a week. I cried for a week. 100% cried for a week. But the point I was making was I was always really angry about it.
Yeah.
And when they cancelled the heavy metal show, they had more negative feedback than anything they ever did. So I was always stropping around, blah, blah, blah. In my old age, I'm trying to look at things a bit different. I worked at a radio station, a pop one, and I'm like, Taylor Swift's 1989 just came out, and I thought that was a really fun album, and it sounded like 80s pop music, and it's Max Martin, but it's like Max Martin 80, I don't know, I liked that record. I was like, fuck, this is great. So I actually got to
She's brilliant.
She's fucking awesome.
She's amazing.
I adore that album because I love that it's got those 80s, those really 80s things about it. And as my friend said, I have a horrible fascination for gated reverb snare. I love that big,
you see, that's all coming
shit.
back.
Yeah. Exactly. It's huge. I was totally getting to a point here. But with someone like Rihanna, right? Okay, that none of that exposition was necessary. What I think is with someone like Rihanna, because I was like, people don't write their own songs, but the thing is, with someone like her, I almost feel like she's got such a well-defined character and an essence and all that sort of stuff that she might not write the song, but who she is as a muse informs the song. If you're writing a song for Rihanna, she is kind of living in your head when you're writing it. Yeah. And I don't know. I mean,
unless they're complete soulless idiots and, they have no personality, then they're going to make that song their own. They're going to get into what actually the story's about and what they're trying to say. Because unless they're just told by a manager, sing this song, you don't need to know any different.
There is a lot of that. What's the worst thing?
I don't know whether or not I don't work in that world, but I would love to think that whoever's working with them is at least trying to get that performance. I mean, everybody now listening to this is going to go, jumping on the bandwagon of Gaga. Yeah. I have loved Lady Gaga for years, and I think she is so talented. And I've said to Tony on many occasions, we should try and get her to do a song because she did that Metallica thing, and it'd be really cool. And of course now she's gone out and done this bloody
what did
movie.
He say?
Well, he was like, she's good, isn't she? I'm trying to get Pink as well.
Yeah.
So,
Pink's great though. Pink,
she's brilliant.
She did 40 stadium. She was like the most successful live artist in Australia. She did 40 stadium shows. She's beloved
she's
here.
Brilliant.
She's a great fucking singer. She's a great performer. She's a gay icon. She's a good role model. I mean,
she's brilliant. All of these people actually come out and they do this stuff, and the Gaga documentary 5 for 2 is brilliant because it shows this woman who was just breaking out of what the record company made her go through. Yeah. And she's found out what she wants to do, and she's like, I've got enough success. It's the same old story. It's George Michael. It's Prince. It's like, fuck the record company. I'm do everything to be myself again. I've jumped through hoops for them, and they are asking more and more and more. And I've got to be true to myself. And those are the people that are strong enough to do it. I mean, like Beyonce, she's got a character to herself. She's brilliant. So any of these people that can actually get out and do something that connects is stunning. The manufactured shit, however much of it is manufactured, I don't know.
Yeah.
But there's an awful lot that is.
Yeah.
But then you get this iconic artist like Adele coming out, and she's the real deal. You know, and it's not everybody
swears like a sailor, doesn't give a fuck.
She's fucking hilarious.
She's so British,
you know?
like
she is, and she's stuck to her guns, you know. And there's some people who either resonate or they really irritate. Phil Collins is one. I love Phil Collins, but he irritated the fuck out of everybody in the 80s. Poor guy. All he did was write successful songs and be a great musician and performer.
Everyone's like, fuck you, buddy.
You know, but he really did. He even says it in his autobiography, which if you haven't read it, get it on audiobook and listen to it, because he tells his own story.
Oh
it's
my
brilliant.
God, he reads it.
He's awesome. And you know, so those are the kind of the heroes, really. And I guess it's very easy for people to pull up a song. You know, you get these memes on Facebook where it's like, Rihanna, Umbrella, Ella, 25 writers, 24 producers, 10 caterers, all this shit. And then Bohemian Rhapsody, Freddie Mercury. It's very easy to make those comparisons. Yeah. But ultimately, Freddie has become an icon since his death, really. Yeah. Rihanna is a massively positive icon.
I think she's amazing.
Role model.
Yeah,
she's brilliant.
And you know what? She worked her ass off. She's been quiet the last couple of years.
She did.
But I actually got quite fond of her because I was working in the pop music world and I had to find something to love. But there's a few reasons I think she's great. She came out when she was 17. She had a big record and a big tour every fucking year. For that entire time, she had an enormous smash with West Indian patois on the on the chorus. She's an icon for women of color. She did the opposite of the Victoria's Secret. Like the last few years, working on her makeup and her lingerie and all that stuff. She's done all these things that make women feel beautiful and have, had 50 shades of foundation and did this insane in the jungle, the opposite of the Victoria's Secret runway show, like women of every color, pregnant women, like, and just wild and crazy. I just like, it's hard. And, she does all this charity work, and it's like the same with Beyonce. Like, what's interesting about Beyonce is she's like those pop artists from before social media in that no one knows anything about her. She's very cagey about the way they release information. There's a theory that the elevator thing was a stunt because it happened just before they put out tickets for their first ever co-headlining tour. Is that true? Who knows? She'd be capable of that level of mastery. Let's be real. But I don't know. It's what do you think? I
think those people they all go back to this thing of they start creating a family and a community. It's like you get a bunch of people going. I love it if there's something that my kids want to go and see. It's like my younger son. He's just turned 16 in September.
Awesome.
Earlier in the year, he said to me, "Have you heard of Marmozets?" And I went, "Well, I know the name of the band, but I haven't really listened to much of them." So we spent the evening then flipping stuff up on the Apple TV of like YouTube shit. Yeah. And I said, I must know someone. And I know a few people, and I knew the one of the guys that works at the local venue. So I said, "Can you get us onto the Marmozets?" It was fucking brilliant. Yeah. And he felt at that first gig that he'd been to, he was like, "This is amazing." And I looked at dads taking their kids to that gig, and you see it, Ariana Grande, okay, so I think she's a Disney product, possibly. I can't remember. Yeah. It doesn't matter. There's families going out to see live music. They're going to see shows.
Totally.
What's it called? High School Musical. I didn't give a shit whether that was a cheesy program. It brought music to the mainstream for the kids. It's like anything that can get people out and enjoying a show and just being part of music. Because not everybody wants to go to a scutty club in downtown Birmingham. It's like, ugh. Yeah. But if you can go out safely with your kids and go and see, even like going to see the We Will Rock You musical, exposed my kids to Queen.
Awesome.
It was brilliant. And that's so important. So if these people are up there and they really believe in what they're doing, and it's not just about the machine and the hit records that record companies kind of have to exist.
Yeah.
It's more about people taking control of their destinies. That was the nice thing with the Sabbath, the Priest, those levels, is that the record company involvement was important, but the albums were being made by the bands.
Yeah. Well, that
the
thing.
Was so important.
There is, I have spent my time with heavy metal people, and in this world, I don't belong there, in their world, and I'm sure you've spent your life in the very inner sanctum of this world. There is something very beautiful about that. I mean, you're dealing with the people who invented it, but there is something very beautiful about the heavy metal world, and the humility and the kindness and that emotional thing. And what you were saying about, like people saying this got me through things. Like, people are so emotionally, they're not that kind of music. Look, as I said, I like some of the characters. I like some of the cartoon characters that are a part of it. But this music, people, they'll stick with you forever. Like, you know, like, it's a love on a different level.
Fiercely critical as well.
Yeah. Is that weird? Like, how do you deal with that?
It's really funny because I'm just like, I just did what we all thought was right.
Yeah, that's all you can do, really, isn't it?
Yeah. And it's great because you really do get positive feedback.
Yeah. What's the best thing someone said?
Well, the greatest things are like when people just go, you know, they tell you what a fantastic job you've done, and that something that you did changed their lives. And it's even funnier, you know, they'll go, oh, I love that bit that, you know, it's incredible. Who did this? It's like on the latest Priest album, there's a song called Guardians that goes into Rising from Ruins, and they're all, Richie, who did the piano on that? And he goes, well, I wrote it, but Mike played it. And they're like, and I'm like, thanks, Richie, thanks for letting me know, letting them know that it was me, because he could have been a twat, but he's not. You know,
that's pretty rad.
Nice. Yeah, and then and it's nice when people go, that's fucking fantastic, that's so emotive, and that's just so brilliantly done, and something that you do has touched their hearts. Yeah. It's far more exciting to get hate mail, though. That's funny.
What's the best hate mail you've got?
Well, I've only ever had the really funny one I didn't see for about a year because it got stuck in the Facebook Messenger system. Yeah. And it came out, and it was this guy who didn't like Redeemer of Souls. He turned out to be in a majority, actually, but that's fine. But he didn't like Redeemer of Souls, and apparently we were a disgrace. We were a disgrace to all things. We were a disgrace to the metal gods, which was kind of, clearly. I think he was trying to be clever. Yeah. He said you should all burn in hell. You should take your Grammy and your Full Sail degree and take it back and have a ritual ceremony of burning and all this. And I was laughing when I started reading it because it was so poetic. And then he blocked me. So I didn't actually find out who it was. Well, I've got this friend Carol who's a real metalhead. She was at school with me in Florida, and she went and found this guy on Facebook and sent me a link to him playing this Christmas Carol in his studio, and he was criticising my guitar sounds, and I now realise it's because he's deaf, because that could be the only reason that his guitar sounded as shit as it did.
That's hilarious.
And, you know, I mean, if he wants to put it out there and be abusive, that's fine, but he's going to get it back.
Yeah. Well, this is the thing.
And a lot of people go, "Oh, don't." I actually put it up as my status. Yeah. When I found it, I put it up as my status, and I went, "This is brilliant. This is so poetic." And I had a couple of people going, "Oh, don't feed the troll. It's not worth it," and blah blah blah. And I'm like, I'm pissing myself here. This is the funniest thing I've read.
Well, this is the thing, and it's like, and this is a thing that I 100% believe to be true about internet comments. People are never talking about they're always talking about themselves. Always. When they're talking to complete strangers, famous people, they don't know that person. They're talking about their own relationship with themselves and their inner world. Yep. You know, and
it's hilarious.
When you approach the internet like that, it really does change. I'm like, you don't get as pissed off watching people be awful, because you're just like, God, how do you talk to yourself at night? Like, you know, it must be shit being in your life.
They're fame hungry. They, you know, everybody's entitled to an opinion, but it's when you actually go, well, actually, that's not true, because I was there when that happened, and that that happened completely differently. And as 4 people have now told you that's not the truth. Yeah, but you're just defending them. And it's like, well,
No,
this isn't even an argument. This is your opinion, and you're determined not to let it go.
Yeah.
And I mean, I had to unleash all my comrades on Facebook on this Bulgarian woman who had been rude about Andy Sneap.
Yeah.
And I'd warned her the week before. My girlfriend's Bulgarian. She's beautiful. And she goes, oh, don't be friends with this Diana. And I went, oh, there's no harm in it. Anyway, so I warned this woman. Anyway, she went off on one and very stupidly put a comment about Sneap. And so I let her have it.
Yeah. And
I put a big-ass nasty troll on her homepage and then invited all my friends to join the party. And this morning on Facebook was hilarious.
Shit got real.
Oh, it was brilliant. I mean, she was he's abusing me on Facebook. God will punish him, and I'm like, well, he's going to have a bit of a difficulty, isn't he?
Yeah.
So all this shit was going on, and in the end, I was getting so many private messages. I just had to go, look, I've got to just take the post down now and I blocked her because I said I've got some work to do. Funny as this is, I had friends saying this is the funniest shit I've watched in ages. It
is. Look, there's nothing like a good popcorn fight on the internet.
It was hilarious. It really was. But you're just like, and now fortunately she then went on, and the funniest thing was I'd been told by a couple of people, including Richie actually. Richie had said, oh, you shouldn't take it personally, just ignore him. She started on him and he had to tell her to fuck off in the end.
Hilarious. Oh my God.
It's really funny. There's a level of stupidity you put up with, and then you go, oh, come on.
Seriously? Well, it's a lot of people. It's a lot of jealous people. Let's be real.
It is.
Yeah.
And I don't want anybody to feel bad. That's never my intention. I want people to feel good and have fun.
But if you're going to dish it out,
Yeah.
That's the thing.
Yeah. Don't bullshit a bullshitter.
What do you think the biggest lesson okay, we'll do some closer questions.
Okay.
Because I think I've probably this is 100% the longest show we've ever done.
I was going to say, how are you going to edit this down?
I don't edit. That's sorry.
Okay, good.
I need to tell you this now. Yeah, this is why I do a podcast, because I edit the videos so hard that I need to have another thing that I can't.
That's good.
Oh man, if I had to try and cut this down, I would go insane. It's got to flow out the way we did it.
Absolutely.
That's the and this is the Joe Rogan, Howard Stern school of
excellent
conversation. They're my heroes.
When's the Sibian arriving?
Yeah. Howard's a bit more risque than I am.
He's funny, isn't he?
He goes, but they don't really do mute. I love Joe Rogan as a long form thing, but I like this being a music.
Yeah, that's really cool.
Thank you very much. I think
it's my pleasure.
I think everyone could listen to Sabbath magic stories all day. And it's really interesting, this side of music as well, because people don't hear what it's like from you who are in the room with them in your ears. There's not much closer than that. So from all these amazing people you've worked with, what are the big things you've learnt as a person, as a musician, from these people who have, been making records that people loved for decades?
I think the main thing I probably touched on, I think that is just to not accept anything less than your best attempts, your best tries. I don't like to use the word try or effort because it's not just Yoda that says that famous phrase about do or do not, there is no try.
Yeah, that shit's real.
That's a very real thing. I've got a very, very good friend who helped me a lot. He's a martial artist guy, and he was he came back from the dead. Literally, he was stabbed 7 times, and he's a really, really good friend of mine. And he's every time I used to say, "Oh, I'm trying," he goes, "No, you're doing." So it's really important that's another thing that comes out of everything bad that happens is you've got to just do it. If it's not right, your peers or your people that you're working with will help you along the way to make it right.
Yeah.
So never ever don't try something just because there's a potential that it might fail. Because I've sat in rooms with lesser people than the greats who have spent 10 minutes arguing about why a particular bass part won't work when they could have tried it 20 times.
Yeah.
And that's such a small thing, but it's like
it's kind of
session
huge.
flow gets completely disrupted because of that. You know, it's like, just fucking do it. Give it a go. So just, you know, leave everything behind and go, what's the worst that could happen?
Yeah.
If we do this.
Oh, this actually leads into one question that one of the guys on my Facebook sent me. People talk about the key attributes of a good session musician being ability, availability, and affability. Is this schema right for producers as well? What about the relative importance of these things? I mean, you kind of have answered these things essentially.
Yeah, well, I guess really it's what I would always say is I always say technology is not important, and I say that in the way that technology isn't the overriding reason I do this.
Yeah.
I learned very early in my career how to operate the equipment.
Yeah.
I don't look at it. I don't have to look at the gear lever when I drive a car.
Yeah.
I drive it.
It's muscle
and
memory.
That's the point. It is completely, and it's that confidence in going. Nothing that I do is going to get in the way of that performance happening. So first and foremost, you've got to equip yourself with the ability to do it. If you never even aspire to be a producer, just be a great engineer.
Yeah.
If you're going to be a session musician, you've got to learn how to play the instrument. So I know everybody goes, oh, yeah, you know, mixing desk is a bit like a musical instrument. He plays it. Well, that's a bit of a flowery way of putting it. I think you just have these set of tools in front of you and you try to do good with them.
Yeah.
So make them part of your process. And that's the Andy Wallace thing.
Yeah.
He's using the same techniques he's used since he did the early Slayer album.
Yeah.
You know,
he's
it's
like Santa.
Exactly. I'd
I
love
feel-
to
when
meet
I think
him.
of Andy-
I want him to mix something for me.
I want Andy. I feel the same way about Andy Wallace as I feel about Santa, and I believed in Santa till I was 12 years old, which is just says that I don't know.
Absolutely.
I love the idea.
And then that's
I'm just going to think of Andy
you're
Wallace fondly. Let's take a moment to think of
awesome.
him. He's got his eyes twinkle. He has a
They
little
do.
rose in his cheek.
He's funny as well. He's got
Yeah.
this little way about him, and he kind of winks at the camera when he talks.
He totally does. Yeah.
He's
And
funny.
I love that.
I think he's genius because he really gives a shit. And what's really cool, and I do this, I've done a couple of masterclasses recently with a very good friend of mine who, I will name check, it's a guy called Don Morley. Now, he got a Grammy for Amy Winehouse's album. And
tell me Amy Winehouse stories.
Yeah, well, he's brilliant. I gave him his first job in the industry.
Wow.
And he's a really good guy. And he, amazingly, because he's a bit more esoteric or different in his musical tastes. Yeah. He cited Andy Wallace as his favourite guy.
Really?
And I'm like, that's really interesting. And he said, you know, and this is the thing for the people from that point of view of, again, you know, digressing a bit, Andy Wallace will get a static mix going within a couple of hours.
Yeah.
He'll then spend a day to a day and a half moving faders around and automating. The mix wasn't finished where most people finish their mixes.
See, this is the finish point again.
Exactly.
Yeah.
So he started to then listen to the song and decide that's not right for that part. I'm going to change it. I'm going to make it become this vision that I've got. And he's hands down way better than some of these superstar people that are out there that are getting lots of plaudits because he listens musically. So that's the thing. You don't have equipment is not to blame. Everybody is looking for the little the golden ticket. They all want to know what can they buy to make them do this better. Yeah. And I mean, you've got to be a golfer to understand about a slice. A slice is what 90% of golfers have a slice because they don't attack the ball properly. So the thing slices off to the right if you're right-handed. Yeah. And for the last 30 years, magazines have been promising to cure your slice. The front cover of any golf magazine, at least once a month, you'll see on the newsstands a golf magazine promising to cure your slice. Well, if they could, then people wouldn't have slices. The reason people have slices is because they don't learn how to swing the fucking club properly. Same thing with the techniques around anything. If you don't practice, you're not going to get better.
Yeah, there's like a saying, nothing is not made easier by like exposure or repetition. Everything's repetition. So people say it's all the same. It's like absolutely no one is ever going to pay you. People pay you for repetition. Like people, you build. Okay. On a related note, okay, I'm trying to end this, but I'm trying to end this. Okay, I'm trying.
That's fine.
One more thing. Oh, did I just lose my brain? Oh, just had a thing. Oh man.
No, I've put you off now.
No,
it's because you were trying to end the relationship.
I was trying to end it down. I couldn't find the words. Was there a moment? Okay. This I really. Okay, two things. The 5 songs that changed your life, but this is the one question before that. Was there a point, and was it on the first album you did or later, where you finally could trust your ears, or did it happen a lot earlier? Was there a moment where you went, I know what I'm doing?
I think there are multiple points that happens, and it's reinforced by the looks in the room. It's that thing of like, nobody's got any more comments. Yeah. I may have been right.
That's all. It's human again. It's the human. It's the tribal experience.
I'll tell you, it's a thing. It's George Massenburg, great engineer. He was like Earth, Wind and Fire, very technical guy. Got into all the Canadian folky stuff. He invented the parametric equalizer. He is a legend. Awesome. He actually said he's incredibly musical for being a genius electronics guy. He said, if you put on someone else's work, if your stuff isn't as good as theirs and you want it to be, don't lie to yourself. Don't make excuses for the fact that you thought what was a great reference is now shit because it doesn't sound like yours. You have to be as good as what you said you wanted it to sound like. So if it isn't, do something about it. And that's my thing. If I put on a reference and go, oh, fuck. Oh, I have missed the point. I start again, or I change it, and it's that amazing thing of humility that that you have to learn as you go along. Of like, no, I've got to be true to what I'm talking about. I'm not. That isn't what I want it to be, or I got that completely wrong. The artist and I haven't communicated properly. We need to find out where it needs to be. Yeah, and you find a way of doing it, and my main tip per se of if something's not right in that respect would be I do it with Tony all the time because it's sometimes difficult to get him to explain what he wants. So I just go, all right, I do something and I go, is this better or worse? And it's simple.
Smart,
and then you go, well, I know what I did, so does that make it better? And it doesn't. Okay, well, neither of those things. Right, I'll do that then. And you just work through it with them, and they have the patience to help you through it because you know what you're both working towards that goal. And it's then that you define the sound that you're listening for, and it's something. I mean, it's like there's techniques that take years to actually hear. And then when you do, you go, why did I find that so difficult to hear? Because you weren't attuned to it.
Yeah. Wow.
And so you just, it's a lot of experience, but there are moments along the way where I knew I was doing the right thing. Yeah. But I can listen back and absolutely cringe and go, how did we get away with that?
But you're gentle with yourself, right? Like, I feel like great artists and stuff, you're hard on yourself, but you're gentle at this. Like, you got to be kind to yourself.
You haven't got a time machine, so you can't do anything about it.
No.
Because that's the thing, isn't it? I mean, when you go through hell in your life, and people go, oh, I really regret stuff. I don't regret anything because it's a completely pointless emotion.
Absolutely.
You can't do anything about something that happened in the past, so you can learn from it and try not to do it again, but you certainly can't regret it,
Well,
because
yeah,
that's wasted emotion for me.
And you get
that's not
tied
be
to
cold.
the moment when you don't forgive people. And one of the things I think, this is more a philosophy, you got to forgive yourself. Often the person you really need to forgive is yourself. Everyone else is easier, and that can mean people were terrible to you and you let them.
Yeah.
And you got to go, and it's actually more important for you to go, I tolerated that and I'm not going to again. And and I don't know, being kind and gentle is a good way to make records as well as be.
It's really important,
yeah.
and just not get too up yourself. And you're not a superstar. You're just doing what you do. You love it, and I think that's meant to come out in then the response you get from people. And don't be hard on yourself when someone doesn't like it, because there's plenty of people that do.
Yeah,
I mean, that goes through arguments that people have tried to pick with me in engineering and producers groups, where someone just won't let something lie, and I'm like, I've really actually at this point, I don't care what you think anymore. You don't like me. I'm ambivalent towards you, but the fact that you don't like me doesn't matter, because I have plenty of people who do, and I've got enough of them filling my life.
Yeah.
So if you have a problem with me, it's wasted energy.
Yeah, totally.
Move on. Because life really is too short.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Be zen, gentle listeners. You know how it is. We're all going to end up back in the dirt nap, as my friend once said. Like, that's where we're all going. So you might as well have the best possible time.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think maybe. Yeah, I think
that's the Spinal Tap ending, isn't it? Have a good time all the time.
Well, that's that. Have a good time all the time. Be excellent to each other. This actually starts with this show actually starts with a Spinal Tap quote.
Oh, really?
It goes up to 11. That's actually the opening riff. So we're about to actually go into that as we exit the show.
The best quote is from Spinal Tap is, they were still booing him when we came on.
Yeah. Culturally significant moments. Thank you, Mike Exeter. This was
my absolute pleasure.
It's been really. This is the longest show we've done, and there's a reason for it. Yeah, we really appreciate.
It's because you can't shut me up. That's
no, it's start talking about the topics. I think that my listeners will lose their minds over. I know that I've spent most of this time feeling like Wayne and Garth. So thank you very much. Thanks everyone for listening. If you like what you hear, subscribe. This is also a YouTube channel called The Void with Christina. There's 100 episodes up there now of various video conversations, if that is your jam. So thanks again. Yeah, be excellent to each other. Party on.
Party on.